Chapter 866, Bird in a Cage. Chapter 866, Bird in a Cage. You must be dreaming if you think that you can escape right under my watch. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak sneered internally. More than 10 high-level fiend demons had just made their moves when a streak of blood light flashed through the air at an extremely fast speed to escape in a frantic manner. Suzimo had already vanished from the spot. Blood escape. So fast. The demons were alarmed. Some of the high-level fiend demons were quick to act and struck right away. Mud and dust flew everywhere as a tornado that connected heaven and earth was formed from the flat plains. It had a massive aura and ripped towards Suzimo. Swash! A saber created with dermic powers descended from the skies and almost split the voids into two. Dermic powers surged and rumbled. Instantly, more than 10 demonic arts descended and threatened to drown Suzimo. Apart from demonic arts, there were even some spirit consciousness attacks blanketing over. Be it the fiend demons on the flat plains or the fiend demons fighting in midair. Everyone turned around at this moment and watched eagerly. They wanted to know the outcome of this attack. Young Master. First. Little Fox, the spirit tiger, and everyone else was alarmed and shrieked. Swoosh. The blood light tore through the air and escaped 500 kilometers away. The speed of the blood light was way too fast. The demonic arts of the high-level fiend demons were a step too slow. Even the essence spirit secret skills could not catch up to the streak of light. The strength of the spirit consciousnesses weakened beyond the range of 500 kilometers. In the blink of an eye, the streak of blood light had already escaped to the horizons. Thankfully, this was a boundless flat plains with unobstructed vision. Otherwise, the demons would have already lost sight of Suzimo a long time ago. Everything happened way too quickly that most fiend demons on the battlefield had only just reacted to things. Roar! The old ape roared and his figure expanded. Blood-chi rumbled around his body and even his snow-white brows turned scarlet like blood. Lend me your rod. The old ape roared and his spirit consciousness surged. On the flat plains, Monkey felt a load lifted from his hands. Imminent transformed into a golden streak of light and burst into the bone cage in midair instantly, gripped tightly by the old ape. Break it! The old ape held Imminent with both hands, and his terrifying spirit consciousness gushed within. A golden glow burst forth and illuminated the world. The old ape swung Imminent violently against the bone cage. Boom! A deafening noise echoed. Crack! 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 Immediately after, cracks appeared one after another on the surface of the bone cage and spread continuously. The figures of the overlords of Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island, and Confusion Mist Swamp shook. Their expressions were filled with horror. They had almost lost control of the bone cage completely. At the sight of that, the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak hesitated for a moment before a look of conviction flashed through his eyes. Try to hold on. I'll go slaughter that lowlife in case he gives us trouble in the future. Before his sentence was finished, he disappeared in a flash and was already in pursuit of the streak of blood light with a cold, killing intent in his eyes. He knew very well that Suzimo would definitely be a huge problem for them if they let him off right now. More than 10 high-level fiend demons followed swiftly behind with their full might. However, the distance between them and the streak of blood light increased continuously. All of them were extremely shocked. The difference between them and Suzimo was 2 cultivation realms, and they had a complete advantage in terms of strength. Yet, they could not catch up to Suzimo. What escape technique could produce such a frightening speed? In less than 15 minutes, they lost track of Suzimo. The wind howled in his ears, and the shadows of trees flashed past his eyes in reverse. Right now, what Suzimo released could not be considered as blood escape. It was dermic blood escape that made use of dermic powers channeled from his essence spirits while burning his bloodline at the same time. The speed of dermic blood escape was even faster than blood escape, and its burst power was even more impressive. That was also the reason why he could break out of the encirclement and shake off the tail of more than 10 high-level fiend demons hot in his pursuit. Suzimo was calmer now, but he continued forward without stopping. The distance between them was not far enough. He had a strong blood stench on him, and the only way he could not be tracked by those high-level fiend demons hunting him was if he was a certain distance away. Suddenly, Suzimo's heart skipped a beat, as though he sensed something. He frowned slightly and turned back as his pupils constricted. Several thousand feet behind him, a tall, scrawny figure rode on the clouds and was hot on his tail. It was the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. Suzimo frowned deeply and was secretly alarmed. To think that although he managed to shake off more than 10 high-level fiend demons, he could not shake off the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. The distance between them did not shorten. However, if the distance was maintained, it was almost impossible for him to escape from the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak either. Suzimo did not know that he was not the only one shocked. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was as well. Initially, the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak looked at Suzimo's escape with disdain. That was because a long time ago, he obtained an escape technique from a beast bone within an ancient ruin. Once released, he would become extremely fast and move with lightning speed. He could even catch up to the stars. He might not have the strongest combat strength among the 7 overlords. However, he was ranked number 1 in speed. He thought that he would catch up to Suzimo within a few breaths. But now, the two of them were already sprinting for an hour and had left the high-level fiend demons far behind a long time ago. However, he was still unable to catch up to Suzimo. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's expression was grim. Dharmic powers surged from heaven and earth into his body continuously. He remained right behind Suzimo the entire time without letting up at all. This low-level fiend demon was hiding many secrets. The potential of this demon seemed to be limitless. Because of that, the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was extremely wary and even more determined to kill Suzimo. With a cold gaze, the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak shouted as he chased, "Lowlife, even if you flee into the heavens or burrow underground, I'm going to kill you today." Suzimo remained silent and merely continued fleeing dully. "Fufu, why aren't you speaking?" The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak sneered sinisterly. "You know it yourself. Everything you're doing right now is futile and is merely your final attempt at struggling." Suzimo was clear that the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was trying to rile him with words. If he was distracted or affected by fear, hesitance, or cowardice, his speed would definitely drop. At that time, he would die for sure. However, more than that, Suzimo was certain that the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was not just trying to scare him. He was almost certainly dead now that he was targeted by an Overlord. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's eyes were filled with ridicule as he said coolly, "Lowlife, your escape technique sure is heavenly defying. It's definitely taking a huge toll on your body, and you won't be able to last long." As an Overlord, he had not lived in vain for thousands of years. Although he did not understand much about Dharmic blood escape, he could almost guess the truth. Suzimo pursed his lips tightly and remained silent still. To be fair, even if blood escape had no sequela, he was definitely incapable of comparing to an Overlord in terms of stamina or Dharmic powers. The two of them continued sprinting one after another. Perhaps because it was too long, Suzimo's speed had indeed decreased, and the distance between them narrowed as well. At the sight of that, the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was even more certain that he had not guessed wrongly. "Lowlife, don't worry, I'm in no hurry." A cruel, playful look appeared on the face of the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak as he roared in laughter. "I'll continue with this war of attrition, and you won't be able to withstand it eventually. Ha ha ha." The moment he said that, the distance between them seemed to have narrowed further. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's gaze narrowed. He could clearly see that the back of Suzimo's green robes was drenched with sweat. His ears twitched, and he could even hear heavy pants coming from Suzimo. Those were signs of fatigue. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was thoroughly relaxed. To him, Suzumo was now a bird in a cage that could not escape. Chapter 867. Killing an Overlord. Chapter 867. Killing an Overlord. The distance between the two of them narrowed constantly. Suzumo's figure started staggering, as though he was almost out of stamina. Furthermore, the sequela of dermic blood escape seemed to be intense. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's eyes were filled with mockery as he let out a cruel smirk. It was as though he could see the panic, fear, and helplessness on Suzumo's face right now. However, in reality, Suzumo's back was against him. If the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak could see Suzumo's face right now, he would discover to his shock that there was no panic, fear, or helplessness on this refined face the same way he had imagined. Instead, there was only a single expression on that face: calmness. The more dangerous the situation was, the more one needed to be calm. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was filled with killing intent. However, it was the same for Suzumo's eyes at that moment. Given his capabilities, there was no way he could escape from the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak at all. His only shot at survival was to kill the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. Killing an Overlord? That was truly an ambitious thought. Even for the other Overlords, they could not guarantee that they could kill an Overlord for sure, let alone a low-level fiend demon. However, Suzumo dared to harbor such thoughts. The situation was not completely hopeless for him. He was definitely not a match for the Overlord in head-on combat. However, he had many trump cards. Among them, one of the most important trump cards he had was the divine phoenix bone that Dayu left behind in his body. Within the cultivation world, it was no longer a secret that he had a divine phoenix bone within his body. Many cultivators knew that. Previously, Dao Being Xinyu of Great Qian Ruins tried to kill Suzumo in the Great Qian Ruins. At that time, he even avoided the divine phoenix bone intentionally and severed Suzumo's wrist. However, the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was none the wiser. He did not even know Suzumo's background properly, let alone know about the existence of the divine phoenix bone. If the power of the divine phoenix bone was triggered, it would definitely be enough to threaten the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's life. This was a massive gambit. Naturally, if he won the gambit, everything would be fine. However, Suzumo would die if he lost it. He had no other choice. Even with an utmost treasure like the divine phoenix bone, it was extremely difficult for him to want to kill an Overlord. The only way he could succeed was if the other party was careless. Therefore, the sweat on Suzumo's body and his signs of exhaustion were all faked. His aim was to lull the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak into a false sense of security. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was not wrong. Dermic blood escape did have an immense toll on Suzumo and severe sequelae as well. However, there was something he had missed out on. Suzumo had just exited the blood sea, and there was a tremendous amount of bloodline energy within his body. Suzumo's body was almost filled to the brim. The amount of energy could not be released within a short period of time and was rampaging through his body wildly. His body would explode if this continued on. On the contrary, dermic blood escape provided an avenue for that energy to be released. Therefore, this was the bloodline energy burned up by dermic blood escape, and Suzumo was almost completely unaffected. The distance between them closed up constantly. 1,000 feet, 500 feet, 100 feet. Suzumo did not make a move still, and his gaze turned increasingly cold. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak did not attack either. To him, Suzumo was already a dead person. He was in no hurry and even had thoughts of playing with the other party as he closed in constantly. In the blink of an eye, they were 50 feet apart. This was a relatively close distance. However, Suzumo held it in and continued to bide his time. He wanted to wait for a perfect opportunity to launch a lethal attack on the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet. The distance between the two of them was 10 feet now. It was a reachable distance. Right then, ruthless glint flashed through Suzumo's eyes as he spun around. His scarlet hair danced, and he roared furiously at the overlord of levitating Goat Peak with a lightning gaze. Roar! Behind Suzimo, an illusory phantom of a dragon appeared and coiled into the air. He had actually let out an earth-shaking dragon roar. At the same time, Suzimo's right eye shone with a bedazzling glow. It intensified and burst forth instantly like a blazing sun. He had released a vocal and visual technique at the same time. These two secret skills had instantaneous release times and were Suzimo's greatest trump cards. There was no way to defend against them at this distance. If it was any other high-level fiend demon, they might have been flustered or even severely injured against such a sudden move. However, Suzimo was facing an overlord. Dragon race? The overlord of levitating Goat Peak frowned. In a flash, he raised his palm and shielded himself, blocking the incoming scorching beam of light in midair by a hair's breadth. Shing! Green smoke rose from the overlord of levitating Goat Peak's palm. Illumination Eye was frighteningly strong and even managed to burn the overlord of levitating Goat Peak's flesh. However, the beam of light dissipated the moment it came into contact with the bloodline of an overlord as well. The two secret skills were dispelled by the overlord of levitating Goat Peak with ease, and he only suffered flesh wounds. In all fairness, the moment he heard that bright dragon roar, there was a hint of hesitance within the heart of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak. The dragon race was one of the primordial 9 races. Although the bloodline of the dragon before him was impure and was only a remnant beast, this was still not somebody he could afford to trifle with. However, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak made his decision swiftly. Kill. The feud between them was already set. If he let Suzimo off this time round, it was no longer letting a tiger return to its mountain. He would truly be letting a dragon return to the sea. As long as he killed this demon and erased every single trace of evidence, the dragon race wouldn't be able to say anything even if they came knocking. Furthermore, anybody from the dragon race would definitely possess a ton of treasures. If he made use of them properly, this would be an immense opportunity for him. If he could drink the blood, eat the flesh, and consume the marrow of a dragon, he might become the first grand demon among the 7 overlords. The gaze of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak burned slightly. The moment the two secret skills were released, Suzimo's eyes narrowed, and he suddenly extended his right hand in the shape of a claw to grab the overlord of levitating Goat Peak's face. He had already expected that his vocal and visual technique might not be able to hurt the overlord of levitating Goat Peak. Those two secret skills were only distractions. His divine phoenix bone was his true killing move. However, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak was none the wiser. To him, Suzimo's grab posed no threat at all and was more like the final struggle of a dying beast. "Are you giving up?" The overlord of levitating Goat Peak sneered and said in an unhurried and patient manner, "I heard that you have a strong physique and you're extremely ferocious in melee combat. I'll let you witness the meaning of true strength today." Instead of avoiding or retreating, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak punched forward violently towards Suzimo's extended palm. Boom! The fist and palm connected. An incomparably domineering power struck Suzimo's right hand and fresh blood splattered everywhere. His palm turned into a mess of flesh and blood instantly. However, that amount of power triggered the divine phoenix bone in his right hand as well. Screech! In midair, the sinister cry of a phoenix echoed, piercing through metal and rock with a boundless might. A dragon's roar and a phoenix's cry. Both of them sounded from this person at the same time. Where did that phoenix's cry come from? Instantly, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak's gaze flickered, and he felt a sense of uneasiness. Immediately after, he experienced a shuddering aura that seemed like it could incinerate all life and destroy everything in the world. Chapter 869, Turn of Tides. Chapter 869, Turn of Tides. The flames blazed on relentlessly. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak released a maddened roar, and his blood chi rumbled and surged. A blood mist spread and gushed towards the wound on his broken arm. Sizzle. However, the moment his bloodlines surged to the area of his broken arm, it was burned into wisps of green smoke before it could even spray out. Swoosh! A tremendous amount of dharmic power rumbled and crushed over the divine flames. However, the divine flames shone and riddled the dharmic power with holes, dispersing the latter instantly. No matter how the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak circulated his bloodline and dharmic powers, he could not extinguish the divine flames on his arm. Only at that moment did the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak finally experience a sharp pain that was absolutely unendurable. His forehead was filled with sweat, and he looked on helplessly as his arm was consumed by the divine flames bit by bit. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak almost passed out from the pain. In the blink of an eye, the divine flames burned to his elbow. However, it showed no signs of stopping and merely intensified. If he had no other means, the divine flames were going to cruise up his arm and extend to his body. In fact, it might even be able to burn his body into ashes. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak grit his teeth with a bitter determination. All of a sudden, he withdrew a chilling saber from his storage and circulated his dharmic powers with an icy expression. With a reverse slash, he cut down violently at his own elbow. A blood mist spewed out. An arm that was burning with flames was lopped high into the air. It fell onto the ground and turned into ashes before long. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak shuddered for a moment, and his expression turned paler. He had dismembered his arm. In order to protect his physical body, he cut off his arm personally. It was too ruthless. There was no way he could have survived till today if he hadn't been so decisive and ruthless. In the grass field not far away, Suzimo endured immense pain and his bones felt like they were going to fall apart. His dragon scales had faded and his chest was in a mess of flesh and blood. It was lucky that he managed to complete his dragonification at the final moment. Otherwise, his chest would have been penetrated with that single counterattack from the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. In fact, the dharmic power that attack possessed could even penetrate his consciousness through his body to destroy his essence spirit. Although Suzimo managed to defend against the palm strike of the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak, he did not have much combat strength left. To be precise, he did not even have the strength left to escape. He struggled to stand up, and his right hand had already returned to normal with the Divine Phoenix's claw gone. Blood chi surged and tried its best to heal his internal injuries. He gazed at the broken arm of the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak and sighed gently internally, thinking about how regrettable it was. In the end, he was a step away. An Overlord was way stronger and harder to deal with than he had imagined. Suzimo wanted to retreat. Although he looked wretched when he released Blood Escape earlier on, everything was a part of his plan. In fact, at this final moment, he harbored a killing intent towards the Overlord and wanted to kill his way out of his situation in a heavenly defying manner. Unfortunately, he did not manage to succeed. Now that the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak could not be killed even with the Divine Phoenix's claw, Suzimo had no other choice but to retreat. Suzimo no longer had any trump cards that could threaten an Overlord. However, he had 2 talismans in his storage bag that was given to him by the old monk at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, the Major and Minor Transference Talismans. The Major Transference Talisman was specially refined by a talisman grandmaster for the Great Qin Empire in the past. It could cross a major realm and transport him back to the Great Qin Palace. However, it was unsuitable for him to release the Major Transference Talisman at this moment. The situation at the Thousand Demon Meet did not seem optimistic. Suzimo was worried with the fate of Monkey and the others unknown. Furthermore, if he were to disappear randomly without Monkey and the others knowing, they were going to go insane and might create huge trouble. The Minor Transference Talisman would create a random teleportation. Although the distance won't be too far, it could help Suzimo escape from the threat before his eyes. Previously, Lin Xuanji used a Minor Transference Talisman and escaped with Suzimo and Night Spirit from one of the Forbidden Grounds. the Dragonbone Valley. Suzimo made a decision and reached towards his storage bag. Right then, something weird happened. Before his hand made contact with his storage bag, demonic chi rumbled before his eyes. A gigantic anaconda with a grisly red forked tongue bared its sharp fangs and burrowed out of the ground. Pissed, Suzimo had a great shock. His internal organs were severely injured thanks to the palm strike on his chest by the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. Even if he could react, his body's reaction time was a tad slower. The anaconda slithered up swiftly from his ankle and coiled around him, rooting him on the spot. Demonic chi dissipated. Suzimo lowered his head and saw that the anaconda was transformed from a rope-type dermic weapon. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak had released it long ago. The moment Suzimo stood up, the dermic weapon descended and bound him firmly. Although the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was careless at the start and his arm was crippled by Suzimo, he was still way too far ahead, be it in terms of experience or methods, when he fought with his full strength. Suzimo's heart skipped a beat. He had not expected the counterattack of Levitating Goat Peak's Overlord to be this decisive with so many variations. He tried to shrink his tendons and bones. However, the rope on his body shrank together and did not accord him with any gap to escape with. Without mistake, that rope should have been made from the tendon of an anaconda and was extremely elastic. The moment one was bound, even their dermic powers would be restricted and they wouldn't be able to escape. The minor transference talisman was right in the storage bag on Suzimo's waist. However, his hands were bound tightly and his dermic powers were sealed. He could not reach the minor transference talisman at all. The tides had turned. The situation right now was far beyond his control. Indeed, it would have been a decent outcome if his gambit to kill an Overlord had succeeded. However, he would die if he lost. The price was way too great. Suzimo did not have time to regret his actions and spent all his energy pondering about how he should escape. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak walked over slowly with a cold gaze. He glared at the refined face not far away with boundless hatred in his heart. No matter what, he was still the victor of this fight. However, the entire process was extremely treacherous. He nearly died in the hands of a low-level fiend demon. Furthermore, he even lost an arm in order to kill a low-level fiend demon. The price was way too great. The gaze of the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak burned slightly. If he could make use of everything Imo possessed, including the latter's blood, flesh, bones, marrow, and secret skills, to attain a breakthrough in cultivation realm with one swoop to become a grand demon, he could regrow his broken limbs and revert his physical body to before. At that time, he would be the true winner. In the blink of an eye, the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was already in front of Suzimo. He was skinny but tall and looked down at Suzimo from above with a hint of coldness, excitement, and cruelty in his eyes. He was not worried that Suzimo might counterattack. After all, there was no way Suzimo could retaliate when he was bound by the anaconda tendon. Furthermore, after their exchange earlier on, the Overlord no longer underestimated this demon. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was fully focused and guarded even against Suzimo, who was restricted and was merely waiting to die. Chapter 870, Futile Efforts. Chapter 870, Futile Efforts. Even as the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak closed in, Suzimo had not thought of any escape plan. However, there was no fluster in his eyes. Since he could not escape, he could only fight with his life. Given his character, there was no way he was going to surrender without a fight. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak seemed to have sensed it and paused in his tracks. Suzimo's eyes were cold and a glint of killing intent flashed past. Suddenly, a gigantic bronze square tripod flew out of his glabella. The tripod was rusted and filled with cracks, looking ancient and old. It seemed like it was created countless years ago. Even the voids trembled as the bronze square tripod descended. It swung along Suzimo's hand towards the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak violently. Immediately after, A green lotus platform that was shiny as jade appeared. 5 layers of petals spread with resplendent glows and chaotic chi spread fiercely, blanketing down the head of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak. The struggles of a trapped beast. Shatter it. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak was prepared for this and harumphed coldly. He did not panic nor hurry as he punched out with surging blood chi against the bronze square tripod head-on. Ugh! The overlord of levitating Goat Peak grunted dully and actually retreated a step back. Under normal circumstances, he should have been able to shatter the perfected Lord Dharmic weapon of a low-level fiend demon casually. Even a Tao-being Dharmic weapon might not be able to withstand his Dharmic power. Furthermore, this gigantic tripod looked extremely battered. As such, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak thought that he would be able to shatter it with a single casual punch. Unexpectedly, the bronze square tripod was indestructible and caused his knuckles to be smashed instead. It's just flesh wounds, nothing to be worried about. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak was swift to react. Instead of a punch, he pressed gently against the bronze square tripod instead to push it away. At the same time, he slapped his storage bag and withdrew a long saber, slashing up against the creation green lotus. Clang! The creation green lotus was repelled. A series of cracks appeared on the surface of the saber as well, and it shattered after a split second. The eyes of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak narrowed. Although his saber was only an ordinary Tao Lord Dharmic weapon, it was not something that any casual weapon could shatter. There was definitely something up with this green lotus platform. Another treasure. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak nodded to himself. The more treasures and methods Su Zimo possessed, the more excited he was. That was because he was going to steal all of those treasures and methods away. The creation green lotus was repelled by the overlord of levitating Goat Peak. However, rays of green light suddenly burst forth from the lotus platform. 45 lotus seeds burst forth and green light streaked everywhere with a boundless sharpness. They shot towards the consciousness of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak as though they could slice everything in the void. It was a killing move targeted at the essence spirit. Su Zimo realized that the overlord of levitating Goat Peak was severely injured with the destruction of the latter's destiny Dharmic weapon. As well, this was the moment when his essence spirit was at its weakest. However, Su Zimo was bound by the anaconda tendon, and the only things he could use were the 2 destiny Dharmic weapons in his consciousness. Puny tricks. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak sneered, and his glabella flashed. A terrifying spirit consciousness was released, and the waves of spirit consciousness fluctuations almost materialized. Ripples appeared in midair. Before the 45 streaks of green light could pierce his consciousness, they were dissipated by the spread of the ripples. Although the overlord of levitating Goat Peak's essence spirit was weakened, this was the essence spirit of a high-level fiend demon after all. His strength was overwhelming and not to be underestimated. With the release of that spirit consciousness attack, the aura of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak weakened considerably, and he panted a few heavy breaths. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak's eyes shone with excitement. The green lantern platform was so mystifying. Not only was it powerful, the lotus seeds within could even release an attack that targeted one's essence spirit. It was indeed a rare utmost treasure. Great, great. All of those treasures are going to be mine. Rather than enraged, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak was excited instead. However, the smile on his face froze immediately after. A shuddering killing intent surged over all of a sudden and arrived instantly. His hairs stood on end and his scalp prickled. How could that be? This lowlife still has something up his sleeves? The overlord of levitating Goat Peak was shocked. The 2 essence spirits within Su Zimo's consciousness had fused together. If the overlord of levitating Goat Peak could enter his consciousness, he would be shocked at the sight greeting him. Within Su Zimo's consciousness, his essence spirit assumed a lotus position and sang scriptures. Behind him was the illusory phantom of a gigantic Buddha with a dignified expression. He looked down upon the world with rays of divine light hovering behind his head. Suzumo and the gigantic Buddha opened their mouths at the same time and chanted ancient sutras. Their auras seemed to be fused together, and Sanskrit reverberated through every single corner of the consciousness in a deafening manner. Suzumo's post-fusion essence spirit was forcefully channeling a secret skill. It was a secret skill from the Great Day Rulai Sutra. Given Suzumo's wisdom root, he already managed to comprehend this essence spirit secret skill within 100 years. However, it was clearly stated in the Great Day Rulai Sutra that this essence spirit secret skill was extremely powerful and could only be released by a cultivator at the Dharma characteristic realm. Otherwise, the cultivator's essence spirit wouldn't be able to handle it. Suzumo's essence spirit was only at late-stage nascent soul realm. Even after fusion, his essence spirit was only at the void reversion realm at the most. It was not at the Dharma characteristic realm at all. However, he could not have so many reservations. The situation before him did not allow him any options. This was his only chance. The consciousness of the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was linked to his destiny dharmic weapon, and the glow of his essence spirit was dim. After his arm was snapped, his blood chi was weakened. Thereafter, he dealt with the successive attacks of the bronze square tripod, creation green lotus, and even the lotus seeds. Right now, he was at his weakest. If the essence spirit secret skill could be released at this moment, there was an extremely high chance that it could kill the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's essence spirit. Rulai Dharmic Seal. Suzumo spoke in Suzumo, and the voids trembled. A golden light shone from his glabella, and a swastika symbol gradually formed with a divine might as Buddha light radiated everywhere. The ancient symbol descended with a brilliant golden light that seemed as though it could suppress the entire world. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's eyes widened with horror. His eyes were overwhelmed by the golden light completely. Within his consciousness, his essence spirit shivered against the Rulai Dharmic Seal, and he even had an urge to kneel in prostration. He could not imagine how a low-level fiend demon could wield such a terrifying secret skill. Suzumo's essence spirit was shivering continuously as well. The toll on his essence spirit by releasing the Rulai Dharmic Seal was way too intense. The rate of exhaustion was frightening and was beyond what he could endure. All of a sudden, a giddy sensation surged through Suzumo's mind, and his essence spirit shuddered. Its glow dimmed rapidly, and it was on the verge of falling. The swastika symbol on his glabella dimmed accordingly as well. The golden light was dispersing. The terrifying might was dissipating as well. The swastika symbol quivered endlessly before it dispersed into golden spots of light and scattered into the air. He could not manage to form the Rulai Dharmic Seal eventually. Suzumo's expression was dark and devastated. To think that all his efforts were futile at the end of the day. Ha 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 ha. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak reared his head in wild laughter with a contorted expression. He had survived. Unknowingly, the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak found himself drenched in sweat. His life was hanging on a thread. He could clearly sense the terror of that essence spirit secret skill. If Mo was a mid-level fiend demon right now, he would have most likely died today. However, that was only an if. There was no way he would accord Suzumo the chance to grow further. Low life, this is life. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak retracted his smile and said coldly, "It's your fate to die here today." Chapter 871, Death of an Overlord. Chapter 871, Death of an Overlord. Don't fret, continue to gather your spirit consciousness and release your secret skill. Suddenly, a voice sounded in Suzumo's mind. The voice sounded familiar, but he could not recall where he knew it from. Immediately after, a tremendous amount of pure essence spirit power surged into his consciousness and helped him to stabilize the Rulai Dharmic Seal that was about to disperse. The essence spirit power was rich and pure with a mild burning sensation. Suzumo's essence spirit seemed incomparably insignificant in the face of this amount of energy. The swastika symbol on his glabella that had initially dissipated into golden spots and was scattered everywhere, on the verge of complete dispersion. However, with the support of that essence spirit power, Sanskrit sounded in Suzumo's consciousness once again, and the phantom figure of the gigantic Buddha materialized. The golden spots that were initially dispersed converged rapidly and formed an ancient symbol that radiated with a blinding golden glow. The moment the golden symbol descended, the entire world seemed as though it was frozen. The symbol carried a shuddering and frightening aura. The voids were caving in. There was no power that could stand in the path of the golden symbol. The Reappearance seal suppressed everything. Ah! The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak shrieked, and his eyes widened with disbelief. There was no way a low-level fiend demon could release an essence spirit secret skill as such. With no time to hesitate, the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak channeled his weakened essence spirit and released another essence spirit secret skill to meet the golden symbol that was floating over in midair. The two essence spirit secret skills clashed in midair. However, there was no sound. The void around the collision distorted. Right in front of Suzumo's eyes, the essence spirit secret skill released by the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was suppressed with ease by the golden symbol. It was crushed into dust and dissipated. The golden symbol merely paused briefly in midair before it printed itself onto the glabella of the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak and vanished within. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak jolted. The next moment, his gaze froze up and dimmed. His expression stiffened, and his life force dissipated at a rapid pace. Without dermic power to suppress the wound on his broken arm, it split open and blood gushed out in a stream. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak fell forward stiffly. Bang! He laid on the ground motionlessly. Although his eyes were widened, there was no light in them at all. The anaconda tendon on Suzumo's body slid down as though they were no longer controlled. With his freedom returned to him, Suzumo scanned his spirit consciousness across the body of the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. All he felt was the stench of death without any life force at all. Suzumo peered into the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's consciousness with his spirit consciousness, and his heart skipped a beat. The Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's consciousness was dried up and reeked of death. There was an essence spirit that was split apart and completely destroyed. An Overlord had fallen. Even after he recalled his spirit consciousness from the consciousness of the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak, Suzumo was still in shock and could not recover for a period of time. That was the power of an essence spirit secret skill. Although the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's head was completely fine without any wounds, his essence spirit was shattered completely by the Reappearance seal. Of course, this was not Suzumo's power. If the tremendous amount of pure essence spirit power had not surged in, he would have been the one dead on the ground at this moment. Suzumo took a deep breath and tried his best to compose himself. He surveyed his surroundings and asked in a probing manner, "Senior, collect this demon's storage bag and get out of this place first." The voice echoed in Suzumo's mind once again. It was calm with a hint of antiquity. Suzumo's heart skipped a beat. He was not clear of danger yet. The commotion here was great. The high-level fiend demons they left behind earlier must have already noticed and were most likely on their way over. The longer he lingered here, the more danger he would be in. Suzumo's essence spirit had just released the Reappearance seal, and his body received a strong blow from the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. As such, his bones and tendons were aching terribly. Right now, his essence spirit and physical body were at their weakest. A single high-level fiend demon could kill him right now, let alone the fact that more than 10 were coming. Suzumo staggered and ran to the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. He retrieved the latter's storage bag and put it away. This was the storage bag of an Overlord, and there was bound to be a lot of good stuff within. Suzumo pondered for a moment and cut off a leg from the goat and stashed it into the storage bag. He scanned his surroundings and fled in a direction. As he sprinted, Suzumo asked softly, "Senior, are you still there?" "Yes." "Where?" "In your body." Suzumo's heart skipped a beat, and he almost stumbled over. This time round, The person did not send a voice transmission through spirit consciousness. Suzimo could clearly hear that the voice came from within his body. To be precise, it was his left wrist. A spark jolted in Suzimo's mind, and he had a hunch. Right then, the voice suddenly sounded, "Change your direction. There are 2 high-level fiend demons 100 kilometers in front of you." Suzimo paused hurriedly. To the left, the voice reminded him again. Without hesitation, Suzimo sprinted to the left. However, his essence, spirit, and physical body were both extremely weak, and his movement technique was sluggish. All of a sudden, a tremendous spirit consciousness emanated from his left wrist and enveloped his physical body. It rode with the wind at an extremely fast speed and vanished from the spot before long. The wind howled. Suzimo relaxed his body and saw the shadows of trees fleeting by him rapidly. The spirit consciousness maneuvered him with twists and turns, avoiding countless dangers in the interim before finally settling down around a secluded cave. Suzimo understood what he needed to do and headed in. The moment he entered the cave, Suzimo looked at his left wrist delightedly. He suppressed his overwhelming emotions and asked softly, "Senior Extreme Fire, is that you?" The moment he said that, a scarlet glow burst forth from the Mingwang prayer beads Suzimo wore on his left wrist and stopped in midair. The scarlet glow revealed its true appearance. It was the size of a thumb and seemed like it was burning with fire. Its aura was powerful as it looked at Suzimo with a smile and a bright gaze. This essence spirit was from Overlord Extreme Fire, whom Suzimo encountered more than 100 years ago in the cold lake within Songlang mountain range. Back then, Overlord Extreme Fire was inflicted with toxic poison and was on the verge of death. He was trapped motionlessly beneath the cold lake and endured bitterly for 5,000 years. Eventually, he met Suzimo and left behind some belongings and messages for Suzimo. With that, he let go of his final attachments in life and departed in a carefree manner. It could be said that a large part of Suzimo's later accomplishments had to do with the legacy left behind for him by Overlord Extreme Fire. Everything else aside, Night Spirit was left behind for Suzimo by Overlord Extreme Fire. Later on, Overlord Extreme Fire's essence spirit no longer had any life force after due to the toxic poison. The single Mingwang prayer bead on Suzimo's hand turned warm. Suzimo made a test attempt, and the essence spirit of Overlord Extreme Fire transformed into a streak of light, absorbed by the Mingwang prayer bead. Later on, there had been no activity. Although Suzimo had cultivated to the nascent soul realm, he was still unable to refine the Mingwang prayer beads properly. His spirit consciousness could not probe within, and he naturally did not know about what was going on within. To think that Overlord Extreme Fire was reborn and saved him once again at this critical juncture. Chapter 872, Mystery of the Rebirth. Chapter 872, Mystery of the Rebirth. Senior, how are you? Although Suzimo was delighted at Overlord Extreme Fire's rebirth, he had many questions in his mind. How was the poison on Overlord Extreme Fire dispelled? When did he awaken? Has he recovered fully? As though he could read Suzimo's mind, Overlord Extreme Fire smiled gently and said, "Rest and recuperate first. I'll explain everything slowly." Suzimo nodded. After a momentary silence, he whisked out the gigantic goat leg he cut off earlier and chuckled. "I'll be fine after eating a roasted lamb leg." He was not being a glutton. The goat leg in his hands was the flesh of an overlord and was a great tonic. Furthermore, Suzimo possessed frightening innate regeneration capabilities. As long as he absorbed the energy of an overlord's flesh completely, his wounds would be mostly healed by then. At the nascent soul realm, demons could consume the essence of the sun and the moon. Human cultivators are able to consume sunlight and do as well and could achieve the state of anedia without consuming any physical food. However, the goat leg was not only a great tonic, it was also a rare delicacy. There was no way Suzimo would let this chance pass. Suzimo took out his bronze square tripod and circulated his spirit consciousness to conjure a ball of flames. He tossed it into the tripod and hung the goat leg on it. Before long, the cave was filled with the fragrance of barbecued meat. Suzimo reached out and tore a piece off without fear of burning his hand. He placed it in his mouth and chewed in huge mouthfuls, feeling the essence of blood chi enter his stomach and cruise through his limbs. Downlord Extreme Fire was only an essence spirit without a physical body and naturally could not enjoy this experience. When he looked at the flame within the bronze square tripod, Downlord Extreme Fire seemed to have thought of something and looked at Suzimo's right hand with a wary expression. He asked, "Your right hand is a divine phoenix bone, right?" "Yes." Suzimo nodded and did not lie. Downlord Extreme Fire said sternly, "When the divine phoenix bone was triggered earlier on, the power it released was extremely scary and was at the conjoint body realm." Suzimo was shocked. Conjoint bodies were almost the strongest existences in Tianhuang mainland. Conjoint body cultivators were referred to as mighty figures, and every single action they made possessed the might of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, given his current cultivation realm, he could not trigger the power of the divine phoenix bone. He could not use the divine phoenix bone trump card as and when he wanted either. It was mostly passive, and its shocking effect could only be triggered by the strength of his opponent. "There's no need to hurry." Downlord Extreme Fire consoled him. "Since this piece of divine bone is within your body, there will naturally come a day when you will be able to utilize its power on your own." Downlord Extreme Fire looked at Suzimo and felt emotional when he recalled the circumstances of their first encounter. To think that after more than 100 years, the young man of the past would be at this stage right now. Downlord Extreme Fire gazed into the distance with a nostalgic look in his eyes as he said slowly, "Actually, it's all thanks to the Mingwang prayer beads on your hand that I'm able to survive." There's no wonder why the Mingwang prayer beads are treasures that are able to support Daming Monastery. They truly possess the ability of resurrection by altering fate against the heavens. Downlord Extreme Fire said, "The Mingwang prayer beads were created from the trunks of immortal and soul-nourishing wood on Tianhuang mainland. They have the extraordinary effect of nourishing one's soul and essence spirit. My essence spirit was initially doomed because of the toxic poison. To think that it was nourished after entering this prayer bead and managed to survive instead." When he spoke about that, Downlord Extreme Fire felt a surge of emotions. Suzimo gazed at the Mingwang prayer beads on his left wrist and recalled about the past as well. Back then, he was still a Foundation establishment cultivator who entered the inheritance ground of the Fiend sects with Demonist G and fought against the Fiend heirs. To think that an unforeseen event broke out later on. A skeleton crawled out from an ancient coffin in the blood pool and nearly killed all of them within. He hid inside the stone coffin that the skeleton was buried in with Demonist G. It fell into the underground river, and they managed to survive. That Mingwang prayer bead was found within the stone coffin. Suddenly, Suzimo's expression changed. The old monk at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley had once explained to him the reason why the Mingwang prayer beads were lost. Several dozen thousand years ago, two paragons, the Downlord Bloodfiend and Monk Daming, fought. Eventually, both of them disappeared with their fates unknown. The Mingwang prayer beads were lost because of that as well. Later on, Daming Monastery retrieved 3 of them with another 3 missing outside. One of them was the one Suzimo found in the stone coffin. Within that stone coffin, there was also an extremely evil cultivation technique, the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. The skeleton that crawled out of the stone coffin later on was incomparable domineering and consumed the flesh and blood of many living beings directly. The cultivation technique it used was the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. In that case, the identity of the skeleton was clear. It was Downlord Bloodfiend. The ultimate fiend that massacred the world dozens of thousand years ago had not truly died. Furthermore, there was a high chance that he was reborn. It was not hard to imagine. After that earth-shaking battle with Monk Daming, Downlord Bloodfiend lost and was severely injured. As such, he hid within the Mingwang prayer bead with his essence spirit and nourished himself within slowly. It was most likely because of the Mingwang prayer bead that he was able to survive to this era as well. That was also why Suzimo was able to find that Buddha bead in the stone coffin. In that case, the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra in the coffin should have been etched by Tao Lord Blood Fiend as well. Everything seemed to make sense. However, Su Zimo was still puzzled. Why was that Mingwang prayer bead left behind in the stone coffin? Was it truly a coincidence? Furthermore, when they first encountered the stone coffin, there were gigantic chains coiled around its surface. Who left those chains behind? It was clear that the purpose of the chains was to trap Tao Lord Blood Fiend. However, why would there be a Mingwang prayer bead left behind in the stone coffin in that case? Or rather, why did the cultivator that left behind the chains not kill Tao Lord Blood Fiend outright? Naturally, Tao Lord Extreme Fire did not know what Su Zimo was thinking about at the moment and continued speaking. The first time I awakened was actually at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Su Zimo was momentarily stunned. He truly had not expected Tao Lord Extreme Fire to be awakened that early. Although my essence spirit was nourished after it entered the soul-nourishing wood, the poison in me was not dispelled and I was still in a comatose state. Tao Lord Extreme Fire said, "The old monk at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley was the one who helped me to dispel the poison within." At that point, Su Zimo was enlightened. Back at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, the old monk exclaimed softly upon receiving Su Zimo's Mingwang prayer bead, as though he sensed something. When Su Zimo asked at the moment, the old monk gave an ambiguous reply and did not explain things. In hindsight, the old monk had already noticed Tao Lord Extreme Fire at that time and conveniently saved the latter. Tao Lord Extreme Fire said, "Although I was awakened, my essence spirit was afflicted by the toxic poison for many years and was still extremely weak. I had almost no strength and could not offer you any help. I've watched your journey and battles throughout all these years. You did well. You did not disappoint the reputation of the human race back in Myriad Phenomenon City." Su Zimo shook his head gently with a dejected expression when he thought back about that battle. "Although I won that battle, countless cultivators caught sight of my demon form. There might be no place left for me in the cultivation world." "There's no need to worry," Tao Lord Extreme Fire said deeply, "other sects aside. I can make the decision for 100 Refinement Sect to write your name and protect you from danger." Chapter 873, Dharma Characteristic Realms Physical Body. Chapter 873, Dharma Characteristic Realms Physical Body. Tao Lord Extreme Fire's words were firm, resolute, and powerful. It was clear that he was not bothered by Su Zimo's demonic cultivation. More than that, he did not even care about the major sects or factions that had feuds with Su Zimo. Su Zimo was touched and expressed his gratitude hurriedly. At that moment, he had yet to realize the weight of Tao Lord Extreme Fire's words. He did not know what sort of a character Tao Lord Extreme Fire was in the cultivation world 5,000 years ago either. After all, in Su Zimo's opinion, no matter how strong Tao Lord Extreme Fire was, the latter was merely a Dharma characteristic Tao Lord. His cultivation realm was the same as the old immortal crane, and there was no way he could protect Su Zimo. Previously, in the Battle of Ethereal Peak, the old immortal crane managed to achieve a breakthrough and became a high-level fiend demon that was equivalent to a Dharma characteristic Tao Lord. However, Ethereal Peak was insignificant against a massive force like Glass Palace. Notwithstanding Glass Palace, even against the 10 upper sects of the North region, Ethereal Peak was weak and had no right to speak at all. Su Zimo truly had no other choice when he left the North region previously. In the battle at the Great Shin Ruins, he offended almost everyone from the 10 upper sects, aristocratic families, and gentry clans. If he continued to stay on in the North region, Ethereal Peak would definitely protect him with all their might. However, that would also bring about great trouble for Ethereal Peak. They would be destroyed instantly, and the loss of their legacy would result in them disappearing from the cultivation world. However, Su Zimo did not know that 100 Refinement Sect was not the same as Ethereal Peak. Tao Lord Extreme Fire was not the same as the old immortal crane as well. Su Zimo noticed that Tao Lord Extreme Fire's essence spirit had a powerful aura and seemed like he had already recovered to the Dharma characteristic realm. "Senior, has your cultivation recovered fully already?" "Not yet. I'm only around 80% at best. Downlord Extreme Fire smiled gently. Initially, I thought that I would require several hundred years to recover my cultivation. To think that I benefited quite a bit from the opportunity you just received as well. Just? Zimo froze momentarily and was enlightened instantly. It was no wonder why he felt a suction power from his left wrist within the 1,000-year blood sea as well. At that time, he released the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and was encircled by the young master of Levitating Goat Peak and 5 others. Later on, he nearly became a complete fiend and did not think about the issue deeply. To think that apart from the massive boost to his cultivation realm, the energy accumulated by the 1,000-year blood sea managed to benefit Downlord Extreme Fire as well. Actually, the energy accumulated within the blood sea originally was not enough to recover my cultivation. Downlord Extreme Fire said, however, 7 high-level fiend demons entered the blood sea and died sinisterly later on. That caused the energy level in the blood sea to rise significantly and provided me with sufficient energy. The reason why I did not make a move while you were escaping was because I was absorbing the tremendous amount of energy within the blood sea. That Overlord was truly strong. If I did not recover at least 80% of my combat strength, it would have been difficult to kill him as well. That was the reason why I did not attack recklessly. At that point, Downlord Extreme Fire shook his head gently and lamented, however, aren't you a little too gusty? You're only at the nascent soul realm, and yet you wanted to kill an overlord that was 2 major realms above you. Really now? Zimo felt a sense of trepidation when he recounted the events as well. An overlord was much stronger than he had imagined. He released all his trump cards and even managed to trigger the Divine Phoenix's claw by accident. Yet, he was still unable to kill the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. If not for Downlord Extreme Fire, he would have died already. Although he gained immense benefits during this blood sea cultivation trip, it was extremely treacherous as well. Not only was he hunted down by an overlord, there seemed to be a latent danger within that sinister blood sea too. The 7 high-level fiend demons died in mysterious manners, killed with their essence spirits destroyed instantly by the bubbles from the bottom of the sea. Was it truly just a coincidence that those seemingly harmless bubbles brushed past him? Zimo felt a sense of trepidation when he thought about that scene. Senior, that blood sea? The moment Zimo spoke, Downlord Extreme Fire's expression changed, and he interrupted the former, "Don't ever return to that place. There's definitely something extremely terrifying at the bottom of the blood sea," Downlord Extreme Fire said solemnly. If even Downlord Extreme Fire said so, Zimo realized that the secret within the blood sea was definitely not something he could deal with at his cultivation realm. After a moment of silence, Zimo looked at Downlord Extreme Fire worriedly and asked in a soft voice, "Senior, what about your physical body? At the Void Reversion or Dharma characteristic realm, one would not die even with the loss of their physical body. However, their combat strength would weaken, and they would not be able to release many dharmic arts without their physical body. Furthermore, without the protection of their physical body, one's essence spirit would become extremely fragile, exposed to the outside world. It was like somebody who was floating in a turbulent ocean without the protection of a spirit vessel. He could die at any moment. There were 2 ways of obtaining a physical body. The first was through assimilation. However, the requirements for assimilation were stringent, and the assimilated being's cultivation realm must not be too low. The assimilation process was extremely dangerous as well, and one could be consumed instead if they were careless. Furthermore, every cultivator could only attempt a single assimilation try in their lifetime. The second was to obtain a perfectly intact physical body at the Dharma characteristic realm. However, that was no easy task at all. What sort of existences were Dharma characteristics? It was extremely difficult to obtain their physical bodies. Furthermore, let alone a perfectly preserved Dharma characteristic physical body. The greatest possibility for that was if a Dharma characteristic cultivator was killed by an essence spirit secret skill. With that, their essence spirit would be destroyed with their physical body intact. When he heard Zimo's question, Downlord Extreme Fire swept his glance onto Zimo's body and asked with a fake smile, You're not worried that I might assimilate your body? Suzimo froze for a moment and shook his head right away. Back in Songlang mountain range, Tao Lord Extreme Fire saved his life. Earlier on, Tao Lord Extreme Fire did it again. Suzimo did not believe that Tao Lord Extreme Fire would attempt assimilation on him. Tao Lord Extreme Fire's expression was beguiling and his voice suddenly turned sinister as he said creepily, "Although the difference in cultivation realm between us is way too great, your physique and bloodline is almost perfect and unmatched in history. It's an absolute gain for me if I assimilate you. As long as I cultivate further, I'll be able to recover to my initial self and my combat strength will be superior in fact." Suzimo let out a chuckle and shook his head still. When Tao Lord Extreme Fire saw how firm Suzimo was, he no longer scared the latter and returned to his normal expression. "I'm relieved that you were able to trust me. However, I've still got to remind you. At this point of your cultivation, your physique is frightening and unparalleled. There isn't any cultivator in the world that wouldn't be tempted, me included." Tao Lord Extreme Fire was speaking from the bottom of his heart completely by saying that. Tao Lord Extreme Fire continued, "The cultivation world is extremely ruthless and only the fittest shall survive. Although I'm not going to assimilate you, it doesn't mean that other cultivators won't as well. Although I saved you, there's a chance that I might have other motives as well. You must be careful in the future and not trust others easily." Suzimo nodded. In truth, the reason why he was so firm was not only because Tao Lord Extreme Fire had once saved him. More than that, it was because of his spirit perception. After cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, he was forced to survive in Songlang mountain range through countless bloodied battles. He walked past the gates of hell countless times on the brink of death and cultivated a unique sense that was unfathomable. That was Suzimo's greatest backing. He could not sense Tao Lord Extreme Fire's killing intent at all through his spirit perception. Chapter 874, Phenomenon Reappearance. Chapter 874, Phenomenon Reappearance. At the end of the day, assimilation is not righteous and I'm filled with nothing but disdain for it. Although Tao Lord Extreme Fire's tone was calm, there was an indescribable pride within. If it was any ordinary cultivator, they would most likely resort to any means possible if they lost their physical bodies. Be it assimilation or any other method, nothing mattered as long as they could obtain a physical body. However, Tao Lord Extreme Fire was different. Although he lost his physical body, he did not lose the pride in his heart. Suzimo said, "If you give up on the method of assimilation, there is only one other way. However, I don't know where we could possibly find a Dharma characteristic physical body." His heart skipped a beat as he continued, "There should be many people with the same circumstances as you, Senior. I wonder if there are any cultivators selling the physical bodies of Dharma characteristics." He had not cultivated to the Dharma characteristic realm and was not at that level yet. However, in his opinion, there was a high chance that there would be people selling such things since there were demands. Furthermore, it was a lucrative trade that was not to be underestimated. Tao Lord Extreme Fire nodded. "You are smart. There is indeed the trade of selling physical bodies within the cultivation world. Originally, Tomb Sect was the only one doing it. Later on, Corpse Refinement Cult joined in as well." "Tomb Sect?" Suzimo murmured, "I've got a friend in Tomb Sect. If I meet him again, I can ask about it for you, Senior. However, his cultivation realm is similar to mine, so he might not be able to get a physical body at the Dharma characteristic realm." "There's no need." Tao Lord Extreme Fire shook his head. "Although I look down on assimilation, I don't wish to occupy a foreign body either. That way, even if I recover back to before, I won't be the same Tao Lord Extreme Fire anymore." Suzimo nodded. Even if the essence spirit was the same, there would still be a difference eventually. Furthermore, both methods have similar pros and cons. Tao Lord Extreme Fire continued, "Be it assimilation or a traded Dharma characteristic physical body, the origin of their flesh and bloodlines are both different from the essence spirit. As such, it will be difficult for anyone to return to their previous peak state. Suzimo roughly understood. No matter what, the loss of one's physical body was an irreversible loss. Lord Extreme Fire said in a deep voice, "Actually, there's a third method apart from those two. Gather universal materials to reconstruct the skeleton and recast the flesh." Reconstruct the skeleton and recast the flesh. Suzimo's heart skipped a beat at the mention of those words. What sort of capabilities were those? Lord Extreme Fire explained, "Actually, this is an ancient weapon refinement technique. Using the bones as the foundation and the organs as supplements, the bloodline is nourished and finally, the flesh is recast." Although the method sounds simple, the process is extremely complicated. The bones are reconstructed using universal materials, and the better the quality of the bones, the stronger the bloodline that is born. The stronger the organs are, the more terrifying the strength of the physical would be. Lord Extreme Fire explained with clear details. To begin with, Suzimo had a deep understanding towards weapon refinement, and he was immersed in the explanation. Unknowingly, 2 hours passed and daybreak gradually approached. Theoretically, this ancient technique of reconstructing a body was definitely a secret skill that was only passed down within 100 refinement sect. However, for some unknown reason, Suzimo had a feeling that Lord Extreme Fire was imparting him the ancient technique intentionally. Furthermore, the latter was extremely detailed in his explanation, as though he was worried that Suzimo might not understand. At that moment, Suzimo was puzzled. Not long after, he finally understood the true intention of Lord Extreme Fire. In order to reconstruct a body in the most ideal way, universal materials were the most important criteria. The better the quality of the materials used for reconstructing the skeleton, the more superior the body created. According to the words of Lord Extreme Fire, if the spirit materials used for reconstruction of bones were Khanate treasures, there was a high chance that a set of Khanate bones could be created. Khanate bones were comparable to Khanate dermic weapons. The bloodline and physical body created from the Khanate bones would create a Khanate Dao body. Of course, that was an ideal situation and was not realistic. Nobody in history had succeeded doing so either. What are your plans after this? Lord Extreme Fire asked after explaining the method of reconstructing the bones and physical body. "I've got to return and take a look at the situation of my sworn siblings." Suzimo said deeply, "If they are fine, I'll let them know that I'll be leaving Thousand Demon Valley first to escort you back to 100 Refinement Sect." He had already been in the Thousand Demon Valley for 100 years. He did not know how the cultivation world had changed after 100 years. Of course, more than that, Suzimo was concerned about his old friends back in the cultivation world as well as Xiaoning and Night Spirit. It was time to head back. He continued, "Senior, don't worry. I'll definitely try my best to help you search for the 9 crucial materials used for reconstructing a body and bones." To begin with, Lord Extreme Fire specialized in fire techniques. Therefore, the universal treasures he required to reconstruct a body were the 9 materials of Tianhuang mainland that possessed the strong fire attributes. Of course, these materials were extremely rare to come across. It was even more difficult if anyone wanted to gather the 9 of them. By now, Suzimo had already consumed the flesh on the lamb's leg, and there was only a bone left. His injuries had mostly recovered. "It's inconvenient for me to expose my essence spirit outside. It's better for me to remain hidden in the Mingwang prayer beads for now." With that said, Lord Extreme Fire's essence spirit transformed into a streak of scarlet light and vanished into Suzimo's left wrist. Suzimo tidied his attire and headed out of the cave. More than 2 hours had passed, and the high-level fiend demons that wanted to hunt him should have already left. "I wonder how's the fight around the Blood Sea?" Suzimo murmured. He scanned his surroundings, determined his direction, and decided to return to the vicinity of the Blood Sea to check things out. Right then, Suzimo's expression changed. His heart raced without warning and the entire world seemed to have turned silent, as though something big was about to happen. There was a murderous aura within the forest. Suzimo felt his chest turn stuffy and could not breathe properly. Danger seemed to be lurking everywhere. The most frightening thing was that his spirit perception seemed to be useless. Even his spirit perception was engulfed completely by the murderous aura in the forest. This sort of situation was extremely rare. Right then, Suzimo sensed something and spun around, glaring into the distance. Ah! His heart skipped a beat, and he exclaimed. In the horizon, not far away, above the firmaments, ancient stars appeared one after another. They moved and spun in a chaotic trajectory. Stars in daylight. This universal phenomenon had reappeared once again. However, this time round, it was extremely close to Suzimo. The stars in the firmaments shuffled chaotically and could not help but brush past one another, creating earth-shaking sounds. Lightning flashed and thunder boomed. Countless debris fell from the collision of the ancient stars. Engulfed in flames, these meteors descended upon Tianhuang mainland like a firestorm. Bang! 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 The ground quaked and the mountains shook, as though the heavens wanted to devastate this part of the world. What happened was way too shocking. Furthermore, everything happened right in front of Suzimo. The stars seemed to be hovering above his head with a terrifying might as they shifted, collided, and brushed past one another. The murderous aura filled the world. Instantly, it seemed as though all living beings in the Thousand Demon Valley kept silent out of fear. Under normal circumstances, the stars above the firmaments naturally had their individual trajectories. However, they would not brush past one another, let alone collide. Yet, at that moment, the stars in the skies were in complete chaos, as though they were being controlled by an invisible power. When the firmaments were filled with trouble, devastation would descend upon all living beings. Could it be? Right then, the voice of Tao Lord Extreme Fire sounded. A fiery scarlet streak of light floated out of the Mingwang prayer beads, and Tao Lord Extreme Fire appeared once again. He looked up into the skies with a shocked expression and disbelief in his eyes. Chapter 875, Three Great Sword Arts. Chapter 875, Three Great Sword Arts. Stars in daylight. This universal phenomenon had already appeared once before the Thousand Demon meet, and even the old ape did not know why. From Tao Lord Extreme Fire's current expression, it was clear that he knew something. Suzimo could not help but ask, Senior, what's the meaning behind this universal phenomenon? Make a move first. I'll explain to you along the way. Tao Lord Extreme Fire's essence spirit transformed into a scarlet streak of light and re-entered the Mingwang prayer beads. Suzimo could tell that Tao Lord Extreme Fire's voice seemed to be quivering slightly. He knew that this universal phenomenon was definitely far from simple. Suzimo raised his head and looked at the position beneath the firmaments. It was extremely close to the thousand-year blood sea. They might even come across Monkey and the others if they rushed over now. Suzimo no longer hesitated and sped towards the direction in a flash. A moment later, Tao Lord Extreme Fire's voice sounded. He seemed to have composed himself. If I'm not wrong, a universal phenomenon as such means that an ancient sword art is about to be born. Ancient sword art? Suzimo muttered softly. What sort of an ancient sword art would create such a great commotion and even trigger a universal phenomenon just with its appearance? Tao Lord Extreme Fire said in a deep voice, in the ancient era, there were three great sword arts that possessed the strongest killing powers. Each time one manual was born, there would be an accompanying universal phenomenon. The three great ancient sword arts are the heaven-slaying sword art, earth-slaying sword art, and human-slaying sword art. Suzimo exclaimed softly and asked in a probing manner, the three sword arts sound like they are connected? You're not wrong. Tao Lord Extreme Fire explained, legend has it that the three great sword arts were originally won back in the primordial era. They possessed frightening killing power and was the #1 killing technique of the primordial era. In fact, it could slay immortals and fiend celestials alike. It's precisely because of the immense killing power of the sword classic that it was struck by karma and divine retribution. It was divided into three and was later on known in the ancient era as the three great sword arts. Suzimo was alarmed. Although the sword classic was divided into three, it could still become the three great ancient sword arts and bring about universal phenomenons. It was hard to imagine the original power of the sword classic. These are all enigmas of the primordial era that I had no access of originally. Tao Lord Extreme Fire continued, however, I entered a primordial ruin by accident 5,000 years ago. In there, I read about the records and legends of this matter. Suddenly, Su Zimo was enlightened. Back when he first met Tao Lord Extreme Fire in the cold lake in Songlang mountain range, the latter recounted to Su Zimo the tale of how he entered a ruin and was hurt and poisoned by the living beings inside, such that he almost died from it. So, the ruin was a primordial ruin. In that case, since Night Spirit was brought out by Tao Lord Extreme Fire from that primordial ruin, there was a high chance that Night Spirit was a life form from the primordial era as well. It was no wonder why Su Zimo could not find any records related to Night Spirit even after searching through all the ancient books in Ethereal Peak. Most life forms from the primordial era have already gone extinct, and there were no traces of them left. Even many super sects in the cultivation world might not have any records of them, and these life forms were merely described with brief sentences, let alone Ethereal Peak. Tao Lord Extreme Fire seemed slightly emotional once again at the mention of the primordial ruin. It was as though he still had a feeling of trepidation when he recalled his past experience. Su Zimo steered the topic away and asked, "The heaven, earth, and human-slaying sword arts. From their names, it seems like the human-slaying sword art is the weakest." "You're mistaken." Tao Lord Extreme Fire shook his head. Among the three great sword arts, the human-slaying sword art has the strongest killing power. It is said that the might of the heaven-slaying sword art is comparable to divine powers. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. The divine powers Tao Lord Extreme Fire were referring to were not the innate divine powers that were comprehended by fiend demons upon advancement to high-level fiend demons. They were the divine powers that were comprehended by human cultivators after cultivating to the Mahayana realm to become patriarchs. The human-slaying sword art possessed the might of the Mahayana realm. Tao Lord Extreme Fire said softly, "In the primordial ruin, there are 3 sentences describing the 3 sword arts. When the heaven's killing intent is released, the stars are shifted out of alignment. When the earth's killing intent is released, the dragon snake shall rise. When the human's killing intent is released, heaven and earth shall topple." Su Zimo gazed at the chaotic star alignments in the firmament and was suddenly enlightened, remarking softly, "The heaven-slaying sword art is the one being born this time round." "That's right," Tao Lord Extreme Fire replied. "You must definitely get your hands on this sword art. If you're able to comprehend it, your combat strength will definitely explode." Su Zimo frowned slightly. However, the commotion here is so great, and the overlords held the 1,000 demon meet in the vicinity. It's probably too late for me to get there. Furthermore, if I want to steal the heaven-slaying sword art away from the watch of so many overlords and countless fiend demons, that's probably going to be extremely difficult. Su Zimo was clear that with his current strength, it was unrealistic to think that he could fight against the overlords and so many fiend demons to get his hands on the heaven-slaying sword art. It was true that he had Tao Lord Extreme Fire assisting him now. However, Tao Lord Extreme Fire's combat strength was limited with the loss of his physical body. It was impossible for him to fight against the overlords with just his essence spirit. "No worries," Tao Lord Extreme Fire said. "Don't forget, the fiend demons of 1,000 Demon Valley probably do not know the reason behind the stars in daylight yet. That is your true chance." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat, and he nodded to himself. During this short while, he had already rushed to the area beneath the firmament. Before him, a strong blood stench reeked. Many living beings must have fallen there. After sprinting for a while more, it could be seen in the distant skies ahead that there were several hundred fiend demons with gigantic bodies killing one another in midair. Groar! Roar! The roars of the fiend demons rocked the entire world. Even the void in the battlefield in midair was beginning to contort. That was a massive battle between high-level fiend demons. Among them, there were 6 figures that were particularly striking. Their auras were powerful and swept through the 9 heavens. Every single move they made caused the voids to vibrate. There was an old ape that towered at over 100 feet tall. His fur was grayish-white, and he looked like he was old and in his twilight years. However, his gaze burned and he overwhelmed everyone with a blinding golden rod in his hands. Beside him, there was a bull engulfed in golden flames. He wielded a black, 3-pronged halberd and barged through the demons with an unstoppable edge. The 2 overlords fought together, and their combat strength was torrential. It was clear that they had suppressed the overlords of Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island, Confusion Mist Swamp, and Vermilion Cloud Valley. Suzimo shifted his gaze down and heaved in a breath. Beneath the 6 overlords, the ground cracked and gigantic fissures appeared in a frightening manner, emitting a sinister black wind. The ground was slowly protruding upwards. It was as though there was a massive, unknown object that was trying to crawl out from underground. Crack, crack, crack. As time passed by, the protrusion on the ground enlarged and the number of fissures increased as well. Countless fiend demons stood outside the perimeter and did not dare to advance. An unknown period of time passed. All of a sudden, the world seemed to have gone silent. The next moment, the ground exploded and mud overturned. Like the explosion of a volcano, rays of resplendent light shot forth in a powerful manner. Instantly, divine lights filled the world and spread through the surroundings. Chapter 876, Thousand Demon Tomb. Chapter 876, Thousand Demon Tomb. Sure, sure, sure. The divine lights shot through the air and resplendent light shone everywhere. Although Suzimo stood in the distance, his eyesight was extremely powerful. When he focused his gaze, he could not help but froze on the spot. The rays of resplendent light consisted of many dermic weapons. There were long needles, bone sabers, flying swords, bronze tripods, and many other varieties. A fiend demon that was caught unprepared was pierced through the body by a ray of light. Instantly, a hole appeared with blood gushing out as he shrieked. Another fiend demon circulated his dermic art, and demonic chi rumbled as he suppressed a ray of light. When he focused his gaze, his eyes lit up. The ray of light was a flying sword. It was a Tao being dermic weapon. Furthermore, there were 5 dermic patterns on it. It was a perfect grade Tao being dermic weapon. Even in the human cultivation world, a dermic weapon of this quality was extremely rare to obtain, let alone in the world of demons. Ha 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 ha. The demon gripped the flying sword and reared his head in abundant laughter. Poof! His laughter came to a stop. The fiend demon's head was pierced by a poisoned needle and his face turned green in the blink of an eye. His essence spirit was poisoned and died on the spot before it could escape from the physical body. A woman from Thousand Snake Island picked up the perfect grade Tao being dermic weapon and fled swiftly. The other fiend demons that caught sight of this soared into the air and used various methods to capture the divine streaks of light in the air. Mine is also a perfect dermic weapon. Ah, it's a supreme grade dermic weapon. You must have a death wish. How dare you take my dermic weapon? The exclamations of demons echoed as massacres broke out everywhere. Some of the fiend demons were encircled by other fiend demons the moment they obtained a dermic weapon, and the dermic weapons were taken away right away as well. Chi! A streak of light tore through the air towards Suzimo's direction and arrived instantly. Suzimo's expression changed as he reached out to grab the streak of divine light. It was not a dermic weapon, but a scarlet rock that gave off an incomparably scorching aura. It was slightly scalding to the touch. Furthermore, Suzimo gripped it with his right hand, and the divine phoenix bone within was reacting slightly. What's that? He scanned it up and down but could not see anything from it. Hold on. Lord Extreme Fire's voice sounded. That's a scarlet phoenix blood ore. It's a rare material with utmost yang and flame attributes in the cultivation world. Hurry and keep it. If Lord Extreme Fire wanted to reconstruct a set of skeleton that was suitable for his Tao and dermic powers, He would require 9 rare materials with utmost yang and fire attributes. The Scarlet Phoenix blood, or was one of them. Legend has it that the Scarlet Phoenix blood, or is a rock that has been soaked in the blood of a phoenix. Eventually formed after dozens of thousands of years, it was easy to see how rare this material was. Even money might not be able to purchase such a rare material in the marketplace of the cultivation world. Suzimo had not expected to come across a piece of it in the Thousand Demon Valley. Previously, he absorbed quite a bit of dragon vein back in the astral dragon sputum lair in the ancient battlefield. Unknowingly, the fortune augmentation on him must have had some effect as well. Hand over that treasure. Right then, the sound of clothes fluttering through the air echoed. 7 fiend demons were charging over. They followed the divine light released by the Scarlet Phoenix blood, or... Suzimo swept his gaze and could not help but sneer when he sensed that the 7 of them were mid-level fiend demons. He flipped his palm and put away the Scarlet Phoenix blood, or immediately. You must have a death wish. What was that treasure you hid away? A fiend demon approached with killing intent on his face as he pointed at Suzimo and shouted. The other few fiend demons encircled Suzimo rapidly with hostile expressions as well. Before long, the expression on one of their faces changed. He pointed at Suzimo with widened eyes of disbelief and asked in a quivering voice, "Why, you're Imo, aren't you? You're not dead?" All the demons witnessed Suzimo fleeing with blood escape previously with the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak hot on his tails. To all of them, Suzimo was definitely doomed since he was targeted by an Overlord. However, to think that Suzimo managed to return alive. At the mention of Imo, the remaining few fiend demons also jumped in shock and retreated hurriedly. Only a fiend demon from Levitating Goat Peak that stood at the front remained motionless. Instead, he looked at the remaining fiend demons with mocking expressions and declared loudly, "Why are all of you so scared because of a low-level fiend demon? How shameful! Brother Yang, you arrived late and did not witness this demon's capabilities." A fiend demon tried to explain hurriedly. Unexpectedly, the fiend demon of Levitating Goat Peak interrupted with a stifled chuckle. How capable can a low-level fiend demon be? If he doesn't hand that treasure over to me today, I'm going to. What are you going to do? A voice, calm and cold, sounded in the ears of the fiend demon of Levitating Goat Peak. Pissed. The fiend demon of Levitating Goat Peak gasped. Unknowingly, Suzimo had already appeared before him. It was too fast. Without hesitation, the fiend demon of Levitating Goat Peak wanted to condense an essence spirit secret skill. Unexpectedly, Suzimo roared, "Get lost." His voice was like thunder. The figure of the fiend demon of Levitating Goat Peak shuddered, and he froze before he could complete his essence spirit secret skill. In that brief period of time, Suzimo had already advanced with the momentum and slapped the demon on the head. Piak! The demon's head cracked open and the essence spirit within ruptured into pieces right away. Suzimo did not stop and had already sped forward. By the time the few fiend demons snapped out of their stupor, all they were left with was a fleeing back view. Why are there so many dermic weapons flying out all of a sudden? What exactly is hidden underground? Suzimo muttered softly. This time round, even Tao Lord Extreme Fire did not reply, as though he was seemingly perplexed over what was going on as well. Boom! Right then, another explosion sounded from the ground. The ground shook and the mountains trembled. The already protruding ground exploded completely with a dark rumbling aura, revealing a large burial ground underneath. Countless corpses that seemed to be from a long time ago were amassed within. The flesh on the corpses had already rotted. Even their storage bags were destroyed. Countless dermic weapons were scattered between the corpses. Most of them were dim without light, and only a few glowed faintly. It was a huge tomb underground. From the massive skeletons in the tomb, it could be deduced that almost all of the dead corpses originated from demons. Something must have happened here in the past that caused so many demons to be buried in this huge tomb with corpses strewn everywhere. The ground in the surrounding was already dyed red, and it was horrific. The many high-level fiend demons and overlords who were originally fighting in midair paused as well. They gazed down at the tomb with solemn expressions. Their gazes flickered with bewilderment. Suddenly, the old ape reached out and grabbed hold of a blood-colored rock at the edge of the tomb. It was grisly red and reeked of blood. "That's the 1,000-demon blood crystal." Downlord Extreme Fire's voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind with a hint of shock. There must be at least several dozen thousand demons buried in this tomb for 1,000-demon blood crystal to be formed. Only that amount of blood is enough to create 1,000-demon blood crystal. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. This place was actually a pit buried with dozens of thousands of demons in the past and a torrential dark aura that was almost corporeal. Only after all this time did it finally see the day of light. The stars above the firmaments became even more chaotic. Countless stars flickered between light and darkness as though they were about to descend. A murderous aura spread through the demon tomb. Chapter 877, Birth of the Sword Art. Chapter 877, Birth of the Sword Art. The ground split open and 1,000-demon tomb was exposed. Apart from countless bones within, there were also many treasures. Greed filled the eyes of many fiend demons. Finally, somebody could not hold back any longer and charged forward right away. Thereafter, all the demons swarmed forward towards the 1,000-demon tomb. Demonic chi rumbled. Many demonic arts and weapons clashed in midair and chaos ensued. Up in the skies, the 6 overlords frowned. All of them felt uneasy about something, but could not pinpoint the reason why. Something is wrong. Downlord Extreme Fire's voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind. The murderous aura of the 1,000-demon tomb is way too intense. Many of those fiend demons swarming over are going to die. Su Zimo's gaze was sharp as lightning, and he scanned the place with a tense expression, as though he was searching for something. A moment later, Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he vanished from the spot in a flash. Among the demons, Monkey, the spirit tiger, Ching Ching, Little Fox, and Solitary Cloud formed a 5-man formation and followed the demons to charge into the 1,000-demon tomb. The Rat King stumbled and followed behind them. The spirit tiger asked softly as he sprinted, "Brother Monkey, will that old ape keep your rod for himself after using it?" "No." Monkey shook his head. Given his strength, he could have killed us a long time ago if he truly wanted to snatch it for himself. Why would he wait till now? Don't get worried for nothing. Ching Ching pursed her lips. The Overlord has already asked Second to get closer with his granddaughter. Why will he want to hurt Second? True. The spirit tiger nodded. Little Fox was worried and asked softly, "What about young master? Why is there no news of him after such a long time?" In a way, no news is good news. Solitary Cloud said in a deep voice, "At least, this means that the Overlord of Levitating Goat Peak has yet to succeed." During this period of time, Monkey and the others had already arrived at the edge of the 1,000-demon tomb. Right as they were about to leap in, a figure dashed before them. "Who's there?" Monkey and the others were alarmed and attacked before they could think twice. Monkey's flesh expanded and he hurled a punch forward. It slammed down instantly like a gigantic blood-red seal. The spirit tiger reached out with his claws. Clang, clang. Above the claws, for grisly white sharp fangs protruded and flashed coldly as he thrust at the figure at the front. Ching Ching's azure green feather fan flapped, and a ball of green flames were produced. Solitary Cloud's cultivation surpassed Monkey and the other two, and his eyes lit up. He had already recognized who the intruder was. Although Little Fox did not see the person's appearance clearly, she frowned and sniffed. When she caught scent of a familiar aura, she did not attack as well. In the blink of an eye, Monkey, the spirit tiger, and Ching Ching's attacks descended. The intruder released a punch and collided against Monkey's gigantic seal. He flicked out fingernails that were sharp as daggers with his other hand, and a chain of sparks were produced as they clashed against the incoming tiger claws. Monkey and the spirit tiger shuddered and retreated a half-step backwards. In midair, The ball of green flames had already arrived. The intruder opened his mouth and blew forward, extinguishing the ball of flames. "It's me." The intruder shouted softly, "Don't head over." The figure was none other than Suzimo. The place was extremely chaotic with demonic chi surging everywhere. Any spirit consciousness that was released would be dispersed immediately, and it was impossible to make use of voice transmissions. As such, Suzimo could only make a move personally to hold back Monkey and the others. "First, young master, master!" Monkey and the others exclaimed with delighted expressions. Suzimo took a step forward and said, "This tomb is extremely dangerous. Don't join them. Follow me first." With that, he led the way and retreated with Monkey and the others. Although there were some fiend demons among the demons that recognized Suzimo, all of them were filled with greed with treasures right before them, and none of them could be bothered with Suzimo. Outside the perimeter, Suzimo said in a deep voice, "Something big is definitely going to happen soon. If you see me make a move, don't be worried. Take good care of yourselves and return to Howling Moon Mountain as soon as possible. When the time is right, I'll naturally return to look for you guys." Monkey and the others saw Suzimo's stern expression and felt their hearts skip a beat as they nodded in agreement. Right then, a commotion sounded from within the thousand-demon tomb. It was as though something was being ripped and sliced apart forcefully. "Tsk, tsk, tsk." One after another, blinding white light shot out from beneath the thousand-demon tomb. They were incomparably sharp and ripped the tomb apart. Many fiend demons that were fighting for the treasures in the tomb could not manage to react in time and were shredded into two by the streaks of white light. Splinted limbs flew everywhere and fresh blood spewed. The white lights that burst out from beneath the tomb increased in quantity. The thousand-demon tomb was already lined with dense cracks and warm corpses mounted on top of it with so much blood that could form a river. In that single instant, more than 10,000 fiend demons were killed. Their essence spirits could not even escape in time. Tao Lord Extreme Fire said sternly, "When the heaven's killing intent is released, the stars are shifted out of alignment. The killing intent of this sword art is so strong that even stars can be shifted out of alignment. Those fiend demons that entered are merely sending themselves to death. The heaven-slaying sword art is about to be born, and it's using the blood of the fiend demons as a tribute." The 6 overlords in midair shouted at the same time, "All of you, hurry and retreat." Although they did not know what was going on beneath the tomb, the white lights released sent their hearts racing. Was that sword chi? What sword chi would be this powerful that even the 6 of them felt like they were going to be sliced apart? Tsk, tsk, tsk. The moment the 6 overlords finished their sentence, an even denser sword chi burst forth from beneath the tomb. It was searing and burst into the clouds with a blazing white shade. Few of the fiend demons that charged into the tomb were spared. Monkey and the others stood from afar and felt a sense of trepidation as they watched the scene unfold. If Suzimo had not stopped them in time, the few of them would have become part of the corpses of Thousand Demon Valley. Boom! Suddenly, the Thousand Demon tomb exploded. A gigantic ball of light rose slowly from underground with a blinding brilliance. It was like a blazing sun and was surrounded by boundless sword chi. The 6 overlords were startled and burst in retreat. The sword chi on that ball of light was way too terrifying. If they reacted slower and were drawn inside, they would have been killed with their essence spirits destroyed as well. What's that? What sort of a treasure is it to possess such a might that could trigger a universal phenomenon? The gazes of the 6 overlords flickered, and they looked bewildered. The ball of light was way too humongous. Their bodies that were several hundred feet tall were as insignificant as dust when compared to the ball of light. They could not see what was within the ball of light with their vision. The moment their spirit consciousness descended upon the ball of light, it was sliced into particles by boundless sword chi, a withered and yellowed ancient manual. Suddenly, Suzimo said softly as he gazed into the ball of light. Tao Lord Extreme Fire's heart skipped a beat and he asked hurriedly, "You're able to see what's within?" The ball of light should have been created by the heaven-slaying sword art. However, even with his cultivation, he could not peer through the veil of the body of light. He could not see what was within it all. I can vaguely see something. Suzimo nodded. His right eye looked extremely sinister and was mostly white. It glowed in a blinding manner, and everything was repressed within. Unknowingly, he was already circulating Illumination Dragon Eye. This doesn't make any sense. Downlord Extreme Fire frowned. Given your cultivation realm, you shouldn't be able to see through the ball of light even if you had cultivated Illumination Dragon Eye. He paused for a moment, and an idea struck his mind as he blurted, "I got it! It's the Illumination Stone." Chapter 878, Three Great Downlords. Chapter 878, Three Great Downlords. Downlord Extreme Fire said, "If you can see through the veil of the ball of light, it means we've got the advantage. Should we make a move now?" Suzimo asked. "Wait a while more." Downlord Extreme Fire was extremely calm and said in a deep voice, "There are other people around here." "Other people?" Suzimo furrowed his brows slightly. He could clearly tell that Downlord Extreme Fire was not referring to fiend demons, but humans. Right then, the old ape's two long brows fluttered without wind. He spun around violently and glared into the voids not far away with a gaze as sharp as a saber, hollering, "Who is hiding over there? Get out!" Foo-foo. Mocking and teasing laughter filled the air, and a relaxed voice sounded, "You are all nothing but a bunch of beasts. What can you guys do to me if I come out?" Immediately after, a fluctuation appeared in midair. A man dressed in luxurious robes rode over on the wind in a suave manner. He had elegant features and was dignified and handsome. Wielding a folding fan in his hands, there was an indescribable charm and grace to him. "How dare you? Who are you calling beasts?" "Huh? Your aura? A human cultivator." "This is a human cultivator." Many high-level fiend demons looked over and discovered before long that there was no hint of demonic chi on this person. Instead, there was the aura of a human cultivator. The Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp said coldly, "You're nothing more than a Dharma characteristic of the human race. You must have a death wish for coming here alone." The combat strength of a Dharma characteristic was comparable to high-level fiend demons. However, despite the menacing gazes of so many fiend demons, there was no hint of panic in the eyes of this man. Instead, he looked composed and curled his lips gently with a bewitching smile. Suzimo noticed the emblem on this man's robes a long time ago and knew that he was from one of the 7 fiend sects, Cloud Rain sect. "To think that it's him." Downlord Extreme Fire's voice sounded. Suzimo asked, "Senior, you know who he is?" "His Dao title is Cloud Rain, and he's the titular disciple of Cloud Rain sect." Downlord Extreme Fire seemed to dislike this person a lot and sneered, "Heh, to think that even after 5,000 years have passed, this sniveling thief is still at the same cultivation realm and has not grown at all." Despite Downlord Extreme Fire's remark, Suzimo did not dare to underestimate this man. The deeper one's cultivation was, the harder it would be for them to progress in the later stages. At the Dharma characteristic realm, one's lifespan extends to 10,000 years. It was only normal for somebody's cultivation realm to remain stagnant after cultivating for hundreds or even thousands of years. Furthermore, the fact that this person, Downlord Cloud Rain, could remain as the titular disciple for 5,000 years meant that he was not someone easy to deal with. Let me correct 2 things. Downlord Cloud Rain looked at the Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp and smiled idly before saying in a slow and unhurried manner, "First, I'm not alone. Second, you can't kill me either." The moment he said that, a snowstorm appeared in the voids and the temperature dipped instantly. Thereafter, countless snowflakes condensed in midair and formed a bridge of ice that extended to the distant horizons. A slim figure strode over. In the blink of an eye, she arrived. It was another Dharma characteristic of the human race. "It's a cultivator from Snowdrift Valley," Suzimo said deeply. Downlord Extreme Fire nodded. I don't recognize this woman, so she should be my junior. However, since she's qualified to stand shoulder to shoulder with Tao Lord Cloud Rain, she should not be weak. Someone else with a death wish. The Overlord of Golden Flames Mountain roared in laughter. The Overlord of Thousand Snake Island laughed in amusement as she said in a flirting manner, "My, this is quite the beauty. Can you guys bear to kill her?" Due to the cultivation techniques they cultivated, the female cultivators of Snowdrift Valley exuded coldness that made them seem like ice mountains that isolated themselves from everyone else. However, this woman's features were truly pure, peerless, and ravishing. "All of you had better give way," the female cultivator of Snowdrift Valley said coldly. "Hee hee hee." The Overlord of Thousand Demon Valley could not help but laugh. "Ice Beauty, this is the Thousand Demon Valley, not your sect. You're at the wrong place if you want to throw a tantrum." The female cultivator of Snowdrift Valley did not speak anymore, but her expression turned colder. Suzimo frowned and murmured softly, "What are they doing here? Could it be? They should be here for the heaven-slaying sword art." Dowlord Extreme Fire nodded. "I'm guessing that someone among them managed to tell that a sword art was about to be born, judging from the universal phenomenon in Thousand Demon Valley. Originally, it was already extremely difficult for Suzimo to snatch the sword art from the watch of many high-level fiend demons and 6 overlords. Now that 2 more Dharma characteristics had appeared, it was even more difficult for Suzimo to get his hands on the sword art. The old ape asked deeply, "Why are the 2 of you here now?" "Naturally, we're here to retrieve something that belongs to the human race." Tao Lord Cloud Rain whipped out his folding fan and pointed to the ball of light that hovered in midair not far away. "Ha ha ha ha." The Overlord of Silvermoon Valley roared in laughter, as though he had just heard the greatest joke in the world. "This is a treasure that was born in the Thousand Demon Valley. Who was the one who said that this belongs to the human race?" "I did," another voice sounded. "Sure." A streak of light shimmered from the distant horizons, and the sound of sharp swords tearing through the air echoed, arriving instantly. A white-robed cultivator stood in midair with a long sword behind his back. His long hair fluttered, and he had a prideful expression. His gaze was sharp as a sword, and he exuded an indescribable razor-edged aura. It was a Dharma characteristic from Sword Sect. "This man isn't simple either." Dowlord Extreme Fire's voice sounded. Suzimo nodded. The fact that the 3 of them dared to venture deep into the Thousand Demon Valley was proof that their courage and boldness was unmatched by ordinary men. The Tao Lord of Swords Sect pointed to the ball of light in midair and said indifferently, "That item belongs to us humans, and now, I want to take it away. Which of you wants to stand in my way?" His statement was extremely unreasonable and arrogant, as though he looked down on all the demons in the Thousand Demon Valley completely. "I do, what about it?" A high-level fiend demon of Silvermoon Valley stood out, and his gigantic wolf body streaked through the void. He glared keenly at the Tao Lord of Sword Sect with olive-green eyes that were filled with sharp killing intent. "Whoever stands in my way shall die." The Tao Lord of Sword Sect spoke slowly. Before he completed his sentence, he withdrew his sword. Thereafter, a frightening sword light surfaced and tore through the layers of void, descending upon the head of the fiend demon from Silvermoon Valley instantly. Everywhere the sword chi passed by, the life force in the air seemed to be reaped. "Lifeless sword art," Tao Lord Extreme Fire exclaimed softly. Before that fiend demon of Silvermoon Valley could make any move, his glabella was penetrated by the sword light and his life force was drained rapidly. In the blink of an eye, his entire body withered. A high-level fiend demon was killed instantly by a sword strike. Suzimo felt his scalp prickle at the sight of that. Although he was only watching from afar, he could not muster any form of resistance against that sword strike. All of his trump cards seemed insignificant in the face of that sword strike. The power of the Divine Phoenix Bone was probably the only thing in his possession that could defend against that sword strike. However, Suzimo knew extremely well that the sword strike could kill him before he could bring out his Divine Phoenix Bone. Lifeless sword art. A single sword strike that could annihilate all life force. That is truly an incredible sword strike. Lord Extreme Fire said slowly, legend has it that the founder master of Sword Sect once obtained one section of the three great ancient sword arts. The lifeless sword art was derived from that single section of the ancient sword art. Chapter 879, Massive Battle. Chapter 879, Massive Battle. Suzima was startled at that statement. If the lifeless sword art was derived from one of the three great ancient sword arts, how frightening was the power of the three great ancient sword arts? Suzima was filled with boundless hope towards the heaven-slaying sword art. Back in the past, the ancient sword art was a huge reason why the founder master of Sword Sect was able to reign as the emperor of the Sword Dao and establish the #1 sword sect in Tianhuang mainland. Lord Extreme Fire said, however, nobody knows which of the three sword arts the Sword Emperor had in his possession. The entire battlefield descended into a momentary silence with the death of a high-level fiend demon and the obliteration of his essence spirit through a single sword strike. Everyone, the 6 overlords included, were stunned by that sword strike. A moment later, the old ape's white brows fluttered, and he locked his gaze onto Lord Cloud Rain, saying indifferently, "If I'm not wrong, you should be Lord Cloud Rain, the #2 of the Dharma characteristic ranking 5,000 years ago. You're pretty knowledgeable." Lord Cloud Rain flapped his folding fan gently and smiled with a bewitching charm. The Dharma characteristic ranking. There were 3 ranking lists that were renowned in Tianhuang mainland. They were the Golden Core Phenomenon, Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic, and Supreme Divine Powers rankings. All of them were released by Enigma Palace and encompassed almost all the paragons and monster incarnates in history. In other words, they were the most authoritative and renowned ranking lists. Among them, the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking was refreshed every 100 years. The Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic ranking was refreshed every 1,000 years. As for the Supreme Divine Powers ranking, only the most terrifying Supreme Divine Powers in history were recorded. Unless divine powers that could surpass the might of past divine powers were created by the future generation, the Supreme Divine Powers ranking was almost never refreshed otherwise. The Daos of the 7 fiend sects are different. For example, Overlord Palace specializes in body tempering, while Illusion Fiend Cult specializes in mental state cultivation. As for Cloud Rain sect, Humph. Lord Cloud Rain seemed to be in disdain and harumphed. All in all, the combat strength of Cloud Rain sect cultivators are ranked last within the 7 fiend sects. Previously, he was indeed capable to suppress many paragons of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects and kill his way to the #2 position of the Dharma characteristic ranking. However, I don't know if he has grown after all these years. In midair, the old ape shifted his gaze towards the man and woman from Snowdrift Valley and Sword Sect respectively and said in a slow manner, "I'm sure the 2 of you are not nobodies to be able to accompany Lord Cloud Rain here on the same footing. I haven't exited the valley in recent years. Indeed, I've become rather ignorant and can't tell who the 2 of you are." Naturally, Lord Cloud Rain and the other 2 could tell that among the 6 overlords, the old ape had the most reserved aura and his combat strength was the most unpredictable. However, the female cultivator of Snowdrift Valley had an aloof nature. Even against human cultivators, she might not bother to reply to them, let alone a bunch of fiend demons. The man from Sword Sect was even prouder. His hands were behind his back and unknowingly, his sword had already been returned to his sheath. He looked up into the sky as though he had not heard the old ape's question at all. On the other hand, Lord Cloud Rain smiled and said, "This fairy's Dao title is Snowdrift." He paused intentionally at the mention of that. Everyone realized that this was another titular disciple. The smile on Lord Cloud Rain's face deepened as he continued, "Fairy Snowdrift was the #1 of the Dharma characteristic ranking 2,000 years ago." The expressions of the 6 overlords changed slightly. As overlords, they naturally knew of the cultivation world's Dharma characteristic ranking. There were a total of 72 spots on the Dharma characteristic ranking. The combat strength of Fairy Snowdrift was obvious to all if she was able to be the number one of the Dharma characteristic ranking. The reputation of the two of them was enough to kill someone. They were the number 1 and 2 of their respective Dharma characteristic rankings. It was equivalent to Suzimo and Dean back in the ancient battlefield. If the two of them had appeared together, which Golden Core wouldn't be fearful? Tao Lord Cloud Rain pointed to the man of Sword Sect and quipped with a chuckle, "I'd advise you guys not to provoke this guy. He is the number 1 of the previous Dharma characteristic ranking and the current titular disciple of Sword Sect with the Tao title of Immortal Sword. Nobody can survive against his sword. Lifelessness ensues from his sword. 2 number 1s and a number 2 of the Dharma characteristic ranking, as well as 3 titular disciples. The reputation of any single one of them could shock the entire world. Now that these 3 Tao Lords were gathered in the Thousand Demon Valley, it was obvious what they were after. So, you guys are Tao Lords on the Dharma characteristic ranking. It's no wonder why you're fearless." The Overlord of Silvermoon Valley said coldly, "However, we don't know if you're going to live up to your reputations just yet. I don't care who you guys are. Nobody who tries to steal something from Thousand Demon Valley shall be allowed to leave alive." The voice of the Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp was metallic and resolute. Many high-level fiend demons present were stunned by the reputation of the 3 Tao Lords. However, what sort of characters were the 6 Overlords? All of them reigned over a region with countless demons under their charge. All of them had firm mental states that were almost unshakable. There was no way the 6 Overlords would fear opponents that were at similar cultivation realms as them. Furthermore, the Ball of Light was clearly extraordinary if 3 Tao Lords of the human race were willing to venture deep into the Thousand Demon Valley and brave the dangers for it. That fact alone made the 6 Overlords even more curious about the Ball of Light, and they were bent on getting their hands on it. The 6 Overlords exchanged glances. Although they were fighting earlier on, at this moment, all of them had a tacit understanding and harbored the same thought. No matter who had their hands on the Ball of Light eventually, it must not be the 3 Tao Lords of the human race. Thousand Demon Valley could not afford to be disgraced as such either. Suddenly, the world went silent. Many fiend demons, the 6 Overlords, and the 3 Tao Lords remained motionless. To begin with, the birth of the heaven-slaying sword art filled the area with a shuddering murderous aura. Now that both parties were in a standoff, the killing intent in the void was even more intense and startling. Attack! After a brief silence, the 6 Overlords roared at almost the same time. Roar! Groar! Within the world, countless demons roared and the heavens quaked while the earth rumbled. Mountains shook and dust flew everywhere with gravel mixed in. The 6 Overlords reverted to their true forms and struck Tao Lord Cloud Rain's group at the same time. The other high-level fiend demons moved in to form an encirclement as well. Instantly, dermic powers howled, surged, and rumbled. Countless demonic arts tore through the air and descended with an engulfing, frightening might. They were everywhere, and even the weather changed because of them. Even mid-level fiend demons would be destroyed instantly in the aftershock if they rushed forward, let alone low-level fiend demons. From all directions, fiend demons retreated constantly and hid as they watched the battle from afar. Tao Lord Cloud Rain focused his gaze and a demonic glint shone in his eyes. It was as though countless threads were weaving in an increasingly dense manner. 7 emotions threads. Tao Lord Cloud Rain shouted. In midair, colorful, pretty threads spouted in midair around all the high-level fiend demons. Tao Lord Cloud Rain swept his gaze across. The threads coiled around them endlessly. They increased in number and coiled even tighter. Furthermore, all of these threads were connected to Tao Lord Cloud Rain's palms in a dense manner. The 7 emotions threads. To think that I would see this dermic art again after 5,000 years. Tao Lord Extreme Fire sounded sad and emotional. The 7 emotions threads is the ultimate skill of Cloud Rain Sect, and there are extremely few cultivators who manage to cultivate it successfully. Tao Lord Cloud Rain is one of them. Be it human cultivators or fiend demons, all of them possess the 7 emotions and 6 desires. The 7 emotions threads are meant to trigger the 7 types of emotions that all living beings harbor within their bodies. The more emotional one was, the more they would be affected and the greater the damage they would suffer. As Tao Lord Extreme Fire described the skill, Su Zimo witnessed blood seeping out from the bodies of the high-level fiend demons bound by the 7 emotions threads. The 7 emotions threads cut into their bodies in a frightening manner. Chapter 880, Overlord vs. Tao Lord. Chapter 880, Overlord vs. Tao Lord. Many high-level fiend demons were in a bloodied state, coiled by the 7 emotions threads. Before they could release any demonic arts, they were already in unendurable pain as they sank deeper and deeper. The 7 emotions threads were connected to Tao Lord Cloud Rain's palms on the other end. All of those high-level fiend demons were like puppets of Tao Lord Cloud Rain. They were neither in control of their bodies or their fates. Su Zimo was secretly stunned when he heard the background of the 7 emotions threads. As his cultivation deepened, the level of things he interacted with increased, and the dharmic arts and secret skills that he encountered were more powerful as well. In fact, there were dharmic arts that were unfathomable and impossible to defend against. The 7 emotions threads was one of those. Be it human cultivators or fiend demons, as long as they were living beings, they would possess the 7 emotions of joy, anger, worry, longing, despair, fear, and shock. There would be no life without the 7 emotions, such as a rock. However, even when a rock becomes sentient and turns into a demon, it would possess the 7 emotions to a certain extent. According to the words of Tao Lord Extreme Fire, one would inevitably be controlled by the 7 emotions threads as long as they possessed the 7 emotions. Within this massive battle, the more furious, worried, or frightful one was, the more 7 emotions threads that would be produced within their bodies. As such, they would sink deeper into their emotions until they were dead. There was already a high-level fiend demon that was minced to death after struggling too intensely and producing too many 7 emotions threads. He turned into a mist of blood without any corpse left. Even his essence spirit could not manage to escape in time. It was a truly horrifying dharmic art. The most frightening thing was that Tao Lord Cloud Rain was targeting all the fiend demons by releasing the 7 emotions threads, and nobody was spared. How bold did he have to be to attempt to suppress everyone single-handedly? The 6 overlords were included as well. Of course, since Tao Lord Cloud Rain targeted all the fiend demons, his strength was definitely divided. There was still a degree of difficulty if he wanted to contain the 6 overlords with the 7 emotions threads. The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain's body blazed with raging flames and burned the 7 emotions threads continuously. Although the 7 emotions threads appeared constantly, they could not bind his body. The overlord of Thousand Snake Island was already cut by the 7 emotions threads, and dark green blood seeped out. Her blood tainted the 7 emotions threads and corroded them before long. The other overlords released various methods and broke free from the 7 emotions threads as they charged at Tao Lord Cloud Rain together. Although the old ape looked sluggish, he was the most intense at dealing with the 7 emotions threads. His flesh grew, causing his body to expand as he broke free from the 7 emotions threads directly. Although he was cut and blood gushed out all over, his expression did not change. Kill! The old ape strode forward and swung imminent violently towards the head of Tao Lord Cloud Rain. Instantly, a blinding golden radiance filled the air. Tao Lord Cloud Rain narrowed his gaze and retreated, seemingly unwilling to take the attack head-on. 2 rays of resplendent light streaked through the air, shot from the eyes of the overlord of Vermilion Cloud Valley. They cut through the never-ending 7 emotions threads directly. Many high-level fiend demons seized the opportunity to break free. Heaven and Earth snowstorm. A cold, chilling voice sounded, and the temperature on the battlefield dipped instantly. Fairy snowdrift had attacked. Without warning, snowflakes filled the air. Every single snowflake was hexagonal with extremely obscure emblems and runes carved on them. They were beautiful and sparkled brightly. Although the snowflakes were beautiful, they were merciless. The snowflakes appeared too densely, and a high-level fiend demon could not dodge in time. A snowflake landed on his shoulder and caused a stream of blood to spurt out. Similar scenes appeared all over the place. The entire world was filled with snow that resembled geese feathers as well as tragic fresh blood. The howls of fiend demons sounded everywhere. Unlike the sinister scene of Tao Lord Cloud Rain's attack, Fairy Snowdrift's dermic art looked more sorrowful and surreal, as though it was not from this world. Fairy Snowdrift stepped on the snow and traveled through the air with her white blouse fluttering in an incredibly beautiful manner. She waved her hand and all the demons looked up. It was a truly shocking scene. Suzimo gazed at the scene with a yearning feeling. He did not know when he would be able to cultivate to that level. Dharma characteristics were almost at the top of the cultivation world and had noble statuses. No matter which sect or faction they were at, nobody would dare to disrespect them. The fact that Tao Lord Cloud Rain's group could barge into the 8 demon realms and fight against so many demons in a massive massacre was truly enviable. This was the 1,000 demon meet. Right now, almost all the strongest high-level fiend demons in 1,000 Demon Valley were gathered here. How bold did the 3 Tao Lords have to be to venture so deep into this place? Behold my demonic art. The Overlord of Golden Flames Mountain roared and his glabella shone. The dermic powers around his body surged and raging flames shot into the skies, engulfing the entire firmament. Swoosh! The golden flames enveloped the skies with a frightening might and burned countless snowflakes. Fairy Snowdrift was expressionless, neither troubled nor enraged, when her dermic art was dispelled. Swoosh! 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 A series of blinding sword lights flashed through the air. The sword chi streaked overbearingly, and there was no life to be seen everywhere it passed. Lifeless sword art. Tao Lord Immortal Sword had attacked once again. Unlike Tao Lord Cloud Rain and Fairy Snowdrift, Tao Lord Immortal Sword's attack was filled with killing power. Within a few breaths, more than 10 high-level fiend demons who were engulfed by his sword chi were decapitated with their essence spirits destroyed. The Old Ape and the Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp had to attack at the same time before most of the sword chi in the air was dispersed. Many fiend demons felt their hearts race at the sight of this battle. Overlords versus Tao Lords. This was a clash between top-tier Dharma characteristic experts of the human and demon race. If not for the birth of the heaven-slaying sword art, this would be an extremely rare sight. Suzimo's gaze was fixed and he narrowed his eyes tensely, observing every single detail on the battlefield. He was different from everyone else. The other fiend demons merely wanted to watch the show. However, he wanted to get his hands on the heaven-slaying sword art. He would definitely be mocked if his thoughts were known to others. This was a fight between top-tier Dharma characteristic experts. A low-level fiend demon like him would be killed by the aftershock of their strength before he could get close. He was definitely daydreaming to think that he could steal the heaven-slaying sword art right under the noses of so many Dharma characteristic experts. As of now, Suzimo had no plan. The only thing he had backing him was Tao Lord Extreme Fire. He was still waiting for an opportunity. In midair, the battle intensified as time passed. Although there were many fiend demons in 1,000 Demon Valley, they could not take down the 3 Tao Lords with their encirclement. Instead, many fiend demons were dying instead. In truth, if the 6 Overlords had not taken most of the power released by the 3 Tao Lords, the remaining high-level fiend demons would have died a long time ago. Gradually, both parties reached a stalemate. Although the ball of light was right in front of them, it was extremely difficult for anyone to withdraw from the battlefield. Tao Lord Immortal Sword frowned deeply. This was the 1,000 Demon Valley after all. Now that there was such a great commotion here, there was a high chance that other top-tier experts from 1,000 Demon Valley would be drawn here the longer things dragged on. If a grand demon appeared, the consequences would be unimaginable. At that thought, Tao Lord Immortal Sword spoke as he attacked. Fellow Taoists, please fight with your true strength and help me hold out for a moment. I'm going to head over and retrieve what's inside. In the name of my Tao title, I promise the two of you that I will definitely repay you guys immensely in the future if I manage to get my hands on it. Although Tao Lord Immortal Sword looked composed, he was getting a little flustered internally. All right, Tao Lord Cloud Rain agreed to it loudly. The fact that he could obtain this promise from Tao Lord Immortal Sword made his trip here worthwhile. Chapter 881, Methods of a Tao Lord. Chapter 881, Methods of a Tao Lord. Tao Lord Immortal Sword knew what was within the ball of light, and he was bent on succeeding for his trip this time round. If he could get his hands on this sword art, he would most likely be the second to do so apart from the Sword Emperor. However, he was very smart and did not tell Tao Lord Cloudrain and Fairy Snowdrift what was truly within the ball of light. He merely said that it was a remnant of Sword Sect. He believed that Tao Lord Cloudrain and Fairy Snowdrift would not be able to guess what was inside the ball of light either. There were extremely few people who could deduce the birth of the heaven-slaying sword art through an universal phenomenon. Furthermore, it was only by chance that he managed to catch sight of an obscure statement left behind by the Sword Emperor when he was browsing through the legacy ancient books of Sword Sect. When the heaven's killing intent is released, the stars are shifted out of alignment. When the earth's killing intent is released, the dragon snake shall rise. When the human's killing intent is released, heaven and earth shall topple. Through that statement, he managed to deduce that there was a high chance the universal phenomenon was formed because the heaven-slaying sword art was about to be born. Of course, he was not entirely certain either. When Tao Lord Immortal Sword ventured deep into this place and saw the frightening sword intent released by the ball of light, he was finally convinced that the heaven-slaying sword art was within the ball of light. Fellow Taoists, please help me hold them back for a bit. A while will do. Tao Lord Immortal Sword left the statement and withdrew from the fight. Sure. A sword light streaked past the skies as Tao Lord Immortal Sword sprinted towards the gigantic ball of light hovering in midair. Where are you headed to? The Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp hollered and swung the spear in his arms. Two metallic glints shone in his eyes as he swept horizontally with a monumental might towards Tao Lord Immortal Sword. Tao Lord Immortal Sword did not dodge or avoid and continued forward as though he had not seen it at all. Crocodile Demon, you'll have to get through me first. Tao Lord Cloudrain retracted his smile and got serious. He threw his folding fan and it transformed into a streak of black light, striking the Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp's spear heavily. Clang! The folding fan and spear collided with a loud clanging sound. The spear quivered gently and was repelled slightly. In a flash, Tao Lord Immortal Sword seized that momentary opportunity and slipped past. Tao Lord Cloudrain slapped in reverse and pushed across the air towards the Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp. Dharmic powers gathered within his palm endlessly. A gigantic palm created with Dharmic power appeared in the void and arrived instantly. Six Desires Palm Strike. Tao Lord Cloudrain said softly, the 7 emotions threads and 6 desires palm strike are the ultimate skills of Cloudrain sect. However, the 6 desires palm strike is focused on killing. Now that he released this ultimate skill, Cloudrain is probably going all out. The Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp sensed danger, and his eyes lit up as he howled. Innate divine powers, boulder form. One after another, rough lumps that resembled rocks appeared on the body of the Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp and stuck onto his body such that only his eyes were exposed. This was the innate divine power of the Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp, provided a huge boost to his physical defense once it was released. Even powerful Tao Lord Dharmic weapons might not be able to hurt his true form, let alone Dharmic arts. Bang! The gigantic palm descended. The Overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp's true form was at least several dozen feet wide. However, he was sent flying by that gigantic palm and nearly fell from the skies. Bang! 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 Tao Lord Cloudrain's hands continued shifting and a total of 6 gigantic palms were sent forth. Even the voids were quivering. Go! Tao Lord Cloudrain tossed his folding fan outwards once again. His folding fan opened up, and there were ink portraits within. One after another, nude, handsome men and gorgeous women were having intercourse in various positions in an extremely alluring manner. The moment the folding fan opened up, the men and women within seemed to have come alive and started gyrating. It was as though they could tap on the primal impulses within the hearts of all the fiend demons. Roar! Some of the fiend demons felt their blood pump and entered a frenzied state with a single glance. A demon panted heavily and spun around, lunging towards the Overlord of Thousand Snake Island, not far away in a deranged manner. The Overlord of Thousand Snake Island's expression was frosty, and she killed the demon without hesitation. However, immediately after, another fiend demon that had lost his mind charged over. Damn it! Even with the Overlord of Thousand Snake Island's composure, she could not help but curse. The battlefield was in chaos. Fairy Snowdrift's expression was even colder. She swept her gaze around and conjured hand seals rapidly, causing frost to spread with a single wave of her fair hand. Frost convergence. She hollered with a voice cold as ice. The void looked like the silent surface of a lake, and frost began to surface, spreading everywhere to engulf fiend demons layer by layer. Some of the fiend demons reacted extremely swiftly and circulated dermic powers in their bloodlines to break free the moment a layer of frost formed over their bodies. Some of the fiend demons were slower to react. By the time the frost covered most of their bodies, their expressions froze on their faces as they could not move at all. It was an extremely shocking sight. In the blink of an eye, gigantic icicles formed in midair one after another. Unlike the other fiend demons watching the battle, Suzimo's position was extremely close to the center of the battlefield. However, at that moment, he could already feel some discomfort in his bloodline. Frost chi rushed over wave after wave. Suzimo furrowed his brows slightly. If he had not circulated his bloodline with all his might, he would not have been able to withstand the invasion of the frost chi. He was only at the edge of the battlefield. If he was right in the center, he would have turned into an ice statue before he even approached the ball of light. Right then, a warm sensation spread from his left wrist and cruised through his limbs like a river current. Before long, Suzimo's body warmed up. He knew that Tao Lord Extreme Fire was the one helping him. Don't get anxious, wait a while more. Tao Lord Extreme Fire's voice was unusually calm. Far away, almost all the fiend demons watched this earth-shaking battle keenly. However, Monkey and the others kept their eyes on Suzimo from time to time. By now, Suzimo had already changed his robes. The muscles on his face twitched and his original scholarly and refined aura was gone. In the blink of an eye, he transformed into another person with a brutish aura. All the demons were watching the battle, and none of them noticed this. However, Monkey and the others saw everything clear as day. What's first trying to do? The spirit tiger seemed to have thought of something and was dumb-stricken with his mouth agape. Could young master be thinking of? Little Fox frowned slightly with worry-filled eyes as she looked at Suzimo and the ball of light in midair. Solitary Cloud shook his head grimly. Impossible. Even the aftershock from the dermic power of a fight at this level is enough to kill mid- and low-level fiend demons. Master won't be able to get close at all, let alone snatch that ball of light from under the nose of so many Dharma characteristic experts. Solitary Cloud was not wrong. A moment earlier, more than 10 high-level fiend demons were sealed eternally in ice and fell without waking up after the top-tier dermic art of Snowdrift Valley released by Fairy Snowdrift. With a crash, they shattered into pieces when they fell onto the ground. Although Suzimo's physique and bloodline was strong, there was no way he could endure the invasion of such power. Little Fox pondered for a moment. Most importantly, even if young master could get his hands on that ball of light, how is he going to escape? The situation right now was different from when Suzimo escaped from the Blood Sea a day ago. Right now, the 6 Overlords and 3 Tao Lords were present. Furthermore, all 9 top-tier Dharma characteristic experts were watching the ball of light. Anyone that tried to get their hands on it would be attacked by all 9 of them. Even if Suzimo managed to get his hands on it, and release blood escape, there was no way he could possibly escape. Chapter 882, Demon Sealing Diagram. Chapter 882, Demon Sealing Diagram. In the voids. The battle dragged on with intense relentlessness. During this short period of time, more than 100 high-level fiend demons have already fallen. The 6 overlords were truly enraged by now. Apart from the fact that the 3 Tao lords were truly supreme paragons of the human race, a large part of why they were being restrained was because they had just fought among themselves earlier on. Their stamina and combat strength depleted significantly as they fought against the 3 Tao lords. However, they no longer had a way back. If the 6 overlords allowed themselves to be defeated with the unknown treasure stolen by 3 Tao lords who ventured deep into the Thousand Demon Valley, the Thousand Demon Valley was going to end up as the biggest joke in Tianhuang mainland. The 3 Tao lords would definitely rise to extreme fame because of this battle as well. Roar! The old ape reared his head and howled, circulating his bloodline to its fullest extent. He shrugged his tall and massive body, causing frost to rain down endlessly. Boom! The old ape stomped with one foot and cracks appeared one after another through the initially frozen voids, extending rapidly. Shatter! He rose and swung imminent violently onto the voids in front of him. A blinding golden radiance descended instantly. Boom! The frost in the voids shattered completely and countless high-level fiend demons struggled to break free. All of them trembled and panted heavily. The faces of these demons had already turned blue from the coldness of the frost during this short period of time. If the condition persisted slightly longer, their essence spirits would have frozen up and they would have fallen completely, unable to break free for all eternity. Although their cultivation realms were similar, the difference between them and the 3 Tao lords was way too great. The temperature on the battlefield was still shockingly cold. Apart from the 6 overlords, the other high-level fiend demons were already feeling fearful and did not dare to advance. Burn! The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain opened his mouth and spewed a ball of golden flames that surged towards the shattered frost on the battlefield. At the same time, he bit his tongue gently and spat out a stream of essence blood that splashed onto the golden flames. The flames intensified and became a golden sea of fire that burned into the heavens. Countless frost shards turned into mist, and the entire battlefield was filled with fog. Suddenly, 2 rainbow-colored rays of light shot out from the eyes of the Overlord of Vermilion Cloud Valley and surged into Tao Lord Cloud Rain's folding fan. The dermic weapons of the few overlords descended at the same time. They smashed Tao Lord Cloud Rain's folding fan and its glow dimmed. The overlords of 6 Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp attacked with their full strength. Their demonic arts pushed against the 6 Desires Palm Strike and everything dispersed before long. In the blink of an eye, the methods of Tao Lord Cloud Rain and Fairy Snowdrift were dispelled entirely. Both their expressions seemed to have turned paler. It was as though fighting against so many demons and 6 overlords head-on had taken an immense toll on them and they could barely hang on. On the other side, Tao Lord Immortal Sword arrived in front of the ball of light, but he did not dare to advance recklessly. The glow that surrounded the gigantic ball of light was created by the sword chi of the heaven-slaying sword art and was extremely sharp. Even he did not dare to take it on with his body. Tao Lord Immortal Sword narrowed his eyes, and his hands shifted continuously to conjure dermic arts. In midair, a gigantic, heavenly thrusting sword sliced down viciously against the ball of light. Boom! An earth-shaking explosion was released when the gigantic sword struck the ball of light. The ball of light quivered, as though it was impacted, and released waves of sword chi. The sword chi streaked wildly and sliced through the voids with a cold, killing intent. Tao Lord Immortal Sword had already retreated long ago, but he returned soon after and conjured dermic arts again. Another gigantic sword sliced down. Boom! The ball of light quivered once more and spread sword chi. Bang! 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 In the blink of an eye, Tao Lord Immortal Sword slashed down with a third sword. Outsiders could not sense, nor could they see what he was doing. However, with his illumination dragon eye, Su Zimo was able to witness everything clearly. Every single strike from Tao Lord Immortal Sword caused the sword chi emitted by the ball of light to weaken considerably, and its glow diminished as well. It was no longer as dazzling and blinding as though it could destroy everything like when it first appeared. Su Zimo realized that this could be a secret skill of Su Zimo that was establishing some sort of a connection to the heaven-slaying sword art. Tao Lord Immortal Sword was attempting to subdue the heaven-slaying sword art within the ball of light. Once the glow around the ball of light dispersed completely, the heaven-slaying sword art would naturally belong to Tao Lord Immortal Sword. Perhaps once the sword chi around the ball of light was weakened to a certain degree, Tao Lord Immortal Sword would be able to barge in and obtain the heaven-slaying sword art before the ball of light's glow was completely dispersed. Brother Immortal Sword, how is it? Tao Lord Cloud Rain said with a hint of anxiousness in his tone. At this moment, he was no longer as composed and laid back as he was initially. Although Fairy Snowdrift still looked aloof, she also looked much more battered. The two of them were struggling to defend against the full-powered counterattacks of the 6 overlords and could be suppressed at any moment. Fellow Taoists, hang on for a little more. Tao Lord Immortal Sword's voice was steady, and his gaze became incomparably scorching as he glared at the ball of light right before him that was turning dimmer. He was about to get his hands on the heaven-slaying sword art. He was not going to allow any accidents. As Tao Lord Immortal Sword looked at Tao Lord Cloud Rain and Fairy Snowdrift who were being pushed back, a cold glint flashed through his eyes. He slapped his storage bag and withdrew a gray item before tossing it outside. The item fluttered and hovered above the heads of the demons in midair as it spread slowly. The demon ceiling diagram. How is that treasure in his possession? Tao Lord Extreme Fire's voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind with a hint of shock. What? Su Zimo asked with a voice transmission. Tao Lord Extreme Fire replied, that demon ceiling diagram is a Dharma treasure created by a mighty figure of the ancient era. Although it's useless against human cultivators, it's extremely powerful against demons. Su Zimo nodded. In other words, this was a treasure targeted at demons, similar to the demon revealing mirror. Before long, Tao Lord Extreme Fire seemed to have discovered something and exclaimed softly in an enlightened manner. That demon ceiling diagram is already damaged. There's no wonder why he's willing to take it out. Su Zimo focused his gaze. Although the demon ceiling diagram was called a diagram, it was made from an unknown beast's hide with some fur on it and an ancient aura. It was obvious that a large portion of the beast hide was missing with jagged edges. An extremely powerful force must have ripped it apart. The moment the demon ceiling diagram descended, a horrific might spread everywhere. Within the battlefield, all the high-level fiend demons, the 6 overlords included, seemed to be restrained by an invisible force where they could not break free. Roar! The old ape growled deeply and was not willing to give up. His bones cracked wildly as though his skeleton was about to fall apart. The overlord of Thousand Snake Island was the weakest in physique, and she coughed a small mouthful of blood with a pale expression. If this was the case for overlords, it was even worse for the other fiend demons. Su Zimo was alarmed and secretly dumbfounded. If this was the strength of a damaged Dharma treasure, how powerful would a complete demon ceiling diagram be? The sinister thing was that the demon ceiling diagram only targeted the fiend demons present. It was clear that Tao Lord Cloud Rain and Fairy Snowdrift were unaffected by the shroud of the demon ceiling diagram and could finally catch a breather. Suddenly, Tao Lord Extreme Fire's voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind. There was only a single decisive word. Attack. Chapter 883, Fruitless Return? Chapter 883, Fruitless Return? To begin with, Tao Lord Extreme Fire was a Dharma characteristic cultivator. He was more experienced than anyone else towards a fight of this level and could seize the best opportunities. Su Zimo's attention was focused a long time ago. The moment he heard Tao Lord Extreme Fire's voice, he did not hesitate and pushed his feet off the ground right away, turning into a streak of light that burst towards the ball of light at the center of the battlefield. This was a form of trust. He trusted Tao Lord Extreme Fire completely. After Su Zimo made his move, he gradually realized the current situation of the battlefield. At this moment, all the fiend demons, the 6 overlords included, were suppressed by the demon ceiling diagram and could not break free right away. Although the demon ceiling diagram was powerful, it was damaged at the end of the day with more than half torn. Although it could suppress the demons present, it would not be able to maintain it for long. At that moment, Tao Lord Cloud Rain and Fairy Snowdrift were almost completely exhausted. The moment they took the breather, that was when they relaxed their minds. The only person Su Zimo had to truly face was only Tao Lord Immortal Sword. Even so, it was still extremely difficult and treacherous for him to snatch away the heaven-slaying sword art. Monkey and the others kept watch on Su Zimo the entire time. The group of them sensed it the moment he made his move. Hurry, look. First made his move. Young master, be careful. Little Fox held her hands before her chest and watched unblinkingly with a worried expression. On the battlefield in the voids, the 6 overlords and many high-level fiend demons were rooted on the spot by the demon ceiling diagram and could barely move an inch. The sudden appearance of a figure became extremely striking. The demons watching at the sidelines noticed the intruder and exclaimed as well. Who is that? He must have a death wish to try and enter the battlefield at this moment. I've never seen him before. Is that a fiend demon or human cultivator? That person's cultivation realm doesn't seem high. What is he trying to do? By now, Su Zimo had already altered his appearance, and the black-haired essence spirit presided over his consciousness. His initially scarlet hair had faded as well. Apart from Monkey and the others, nobody present could recognize him at all. Under normal circumstances, Dharma characteristic experts could break through his disguise with a casual glance. However, when 2 spirit consciousnesses swept over, they were blocked by an invisible force. They could not uncover Su Zimo's background at all. That was the power of the Mingwang prayer beads. In truth, even if Su Zimo fused his 2 essence spirits, he was still unable to unleash the true power of the Mingwang prayer beads. It was even more impossible for him to block the detection of Dharma characteristic experts. However, Tao Lord Extreme Fire was hidden within the Mingwang prayer beads. At that moment, the person channeling the Mingwang prayer beads from the shadows was not Su Zimo, but Tao Lord Extreme Fire. Tao Lord Extreme Fire was also a Dharma characteristic expert. Although he lost his physical body, his essence spirit had already recovered more than half its strength. With him channeling a treasure that was once the foundation of Daming Monastery, it was rare for anyone of the same level to be able to see through Su Zimo's disguise unless they had any divine techniques. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo arrived at the center of the battlefield. He had to pass through the 6 overlords and many high-level fiend demons to get to the ball of light. This area was also the region engulfed by the demon ceiling diagram. Although the demon ceiling diagram restricted fiend demons greatly, it had no effect on Su Zimo. Right now, the black-haired essence spirit presided over his spirit consciousness. This essence spirit cultivated 2 top-tier spirit refinement techniques of the Buddhist and Immortal Taoist and was extremely pure. There was no hint of demonic chi on it at all. The demons could only watch with widened eyes as Su Zimo brushed past them. Another human cultivator. A thought crossed the minds of the demons. Only a human cultivator could pass through the power of the demon ceiling diagram with such ease. Tao Lord Cloud Rain and Fairy Snowdrift noticed Su Zimo as well. However, as the helpers of Tao Lord Immortal Sword, they had to stop this intruder no matter if he was a demon or a human cultivator. At that moment, it was clear that Tao Lord Immortal Sword was about to succeed. All they had to do was defend for a while more. At that thought, Tao Lord Cloud Rain and Fairy Snowdrift exchanged decisive glances. Both of them channeled their dermic powers and attacked at the same time. Bang! 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 3 gigantic palm prints crushed over in an engulfing manner. Although it was clear that the dermic power was weaker, they were still not to be underestimated. Crack! 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 Fairy Snowdrift waved her fair hand, and a gigantic ice wall rose from the ground to block Suzumo's path. No matter how weak Tao Lord Cloudrain and Fairy Snowdrift were currently, they were still top-tier Dharma characteristic experts who could kill anyone of the same level with ease. A low-level fiend demon like Suzumo stood no chance at all. Given his strength, it was definitely not enough to take on the two Tao Lords. The suppression of the Dharma characteristic realm alone was not something he could endure. All of a sudden, raging flames engulfed Suzumo's body, and he seemed to have turned into a gigantic fireball that could incinerate all beings. Even the dharmic power around him was boiling. The fireball charged to the front. Boom! A series of explosions could be heard when the gigantic fireball collided against the three palm prints. The flames on the fireball diminished significantly. Immediately after, the gigantic fireball slammed onto the ice wall. The ice on the surface melted rapidly. Right as the fireball was about to penetrate, a sword light slashed over at an extremely fast speed and descended upon the fireball. More than half the flames on the fireball were already extinguished before the sword light even arrived. Lifeless sword art. This terrifying sword art of Sword Sect had descended once again, and lifelessness ensued from the sword. This single sword seemed like it was going to sever all life inside and out of the fireball. Suzumo narrowed his eyes with a tense expression. At this moment, he could not be considered as the one in combat. Tao Lord Extreme Fire was the one borrowing Suzumo's body with his essence spirit to fight against the three Tao Lords. Buzz! The four Tao imprints on the Mingwang prayer beads on Suzumo's left wrist suddenly released a blinding radiance. The four Tao imprints seemed to have fused into one as an illusory phantom appeared behind Suzumo, assuming a lotus position with a dignified appearance. There seemed to be countless mysterious runes etched on his body. Sanskrit echoed all over. Clang! The sword light slashed against the phantom with a jarring sound. The phantom swayed and gradually dispersed. This sword strike that could sever life force had not managed to do anything at all. This was the first time that blood had not been spilled after Tao Lord Immortal Sword released his lifeless sword art. Although Tao Lord Extreme Fire did not say anything, Suzumo could sense that the current situation had already surpassed Tao Lord Extreme Fire's initial expectations. They did not manage to break through the obstructions of Tao Lord Cloudrain and Fairy Snowdrift right away, but were in a stalemate here. The longer things dragged on, the more things could change. Be it against the 6 Overlords or the 3 Tao Lords, they were the weakest and could not afford any change in the situation. This is bad. Prepare to retreat. Tao Lord Extreme Fire's voice sounded, filled with indignance and some bitterness. The 3 Tao Lords were more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. Although the heaven-slaying sword art was right before them, they could only return fruitless. However, Tao Lord Extreme Fire had no other choice but to make that decision. If he was alone, he might have been able to take the gamble with his life. However, Suzumo was here with him, and he could not afford to let the former die here. More importantly, he lost his physical body and only had an essence spirit remaining. As such, the skills he could use were limited, and he could not release many powerful dharmic arts. If they continued to linger here, it would only bring harm upon Suzumo. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.